As a child, Linda was considered strange in the yard because she wasn't afraid of dentists either. When other children were being dragged into the dentist's office by their parents with tantrums and faces red from crying, Linda was eager to peek through the narrow slit of the door and see what was going on in there. She wasn't afraid during dental treatment. Maybe because she didn't eat a lot of sweets, or maybe because everything that was going on aroused the girl's keen interest. She followed every movement of the doctors and afterwards asked a million questions, flapping her naive childish eyes. The sound of boron machines, the wonders of filling solidification, white coats. All this was an outlandish world for 8-year-old Linda. It was no surprise to anyone that after graduating from high school, the girl firmly decided to become a dentist. All through high school, she prepared. Diligently, she learned chemical formulas and diligently solved biology tests. Sometimes Linda put on a white coat at home, a cap, and imagined that she was seeing patients. She had once borrowed a doctor's outfit from a neighbor who worked as a pediatrician at the local polyclinic. "And want you, Linda, in the teeth of other people's uncles and aunts to pick," sighed her mother, stirring the borscht in the pot. "But you want to teach cranky children." "Flipping through a book," replied the daughter. "I guess you're like your grandmother," the woman grinned, "only she was treating cattle on the ranch, and you decided to get to people." Linda grinned understandingly. Grandma Emma had worked as a zoo technician in the small town for a long time, until she retired. And even after that, she often came to check the condition of the animals at the request of her superiors and delivered cows in difficult labor. At the same time, grandmother was not shy to cover young graduates of the Veterinary Institute who had just arrived at the ranch and did not even know that it was dangerous to approach cows and horses from behind. When the ranch was disbanded, the tough-on-words elderly woman continued to be called by the local owners. So as long as the small town had at least a couple of cows, there was plenty of work. Emma lived like that, where she had worked half her life in a small town in Kansas. Linda's mom, Aunt Melissa, took a different path. She didn't want to live in a small town and went to a bigger city, hoping to fit in and achieve a rank above honorary milkmaid. However, the bigger town did not treat Melissa as favorably as she would have liked. The woman did not advance further than a primary school teacher, but received in the last years of good work, a small one-room flat. The kind where the kitchen is already cramped for 2 people. It's where Linda was born and raised. No matter how cozy it was under her mother's wing, but at the age of 15, the girl thought about living separately. But no way. The modest salary of a teacher did not allow such a luxury. Her father stayed with them for a short time. Like many truckers, he lived for 2 families, of which neither of them knew. In the end, the man simply did not return from another trip. The mother waited 6 months, and then, gathering her courage, filed for a unilateral divorce. Linda was secretly sad. She loved her father, and she missed his care, advice, and experience. However, after such a prank, her mother did not start any new relationships. She lived with her work and her daughter. The final exams came, followed by the holidays. And now Linda stood in front of the doors of the medical school, struggling with shyness to enter. She had passed by countless times, dreaming of how she would get her student card and credit. But now the familiar outer wall seemed harsh and pressurizing, even though the fulfillment of her dream depended on them. It felt strange. "You're not a sophomore." Someone touched her elbow. Linda turned around and saw a blonde girl with a pointy nose and strange, age-inappropriate, brightly colored hairpins. She looked like a sophomore. Linda opened her student ID. "Yeah, I'm in 2. "Cool." The stranger shone and clapped Linda on the shoulder. "Finally, I found someone. My name is Catherine, by the way." Linda. "Let's go find our group and office." Without waiting for an answer, Catherine pulled her by the arm towards the entrance. The classmate was probably the kick Linda needed to take the next step towards her goal. None of her high school acquaintances had applied to medical school, and she felt inarticulate. There was a sea of new faces around. Many had traveled from other states to study. Only a couple of times did vaguely familiar necks from high school flicker through the crowd. "I came from the state of Michigan that's 1,600 kilometers away," whispered Catherine on the pair. "Where are you from?" "I'm a local." I grew up here in the city, Linda replied. She didn't really want to be reprimanded in her first class, but her roommate apparently liked to talk. On the other hand, she needed to make new friends in the student body. Cool. I'd always wanted to live in the city, but my folks at the ranch wouldn't let me until I graduated. Catherine rolled her eyes. Linda stared blankly at her new acquaintance sunshine skirt, blouse, shoes that had been the trend in town last year, bright shadows and bold lashes. Apparently fashion was delayed in reaching other states. I want to be a beautician in general, because in our small town, no one knows how to take care of themselves. It's poultices, 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 poultices. It's horrible. Catherine snorted so loudly that she caught the teacher's questioning look. When the danger passed, she expressively poked a finger with acid green varnish on her eyelids and whispered, "And I'll be a makeup artist. I've already seen some success. I've made up all my girlfriends for the wedding." "Yes, I'm sure you did." Linda held back a smile, looking at the bright spots on the face of her interlocutor. The pressure, simplicity, and a certain naivety with which Catherine communicated both repelled and attracted at the same time. In her, there was no frosts of the big city as in her girlfriends. There was wooden, like a birch log, openness, inherent in all people from the backwoods. "What are you going to do? Give injections or run around as a nurse?" Catherine blew her fringes out of her eyes and stared questioningly at Linda. "I plan to specialize as a dentist. It's been a dream of mine since childhood," she replied. "Oh, well, you'll change your mind 10 times. Waved her hand. "What if you don't like it?" "It's difficult. Dentists them now as lawyers, pond. I hope it doesn't happen." Linda tried to write down the outline, while the restless Catherine poured her with questions. "Will you do the session by yourself or with assistants?" Catherine nodded conspiratorially at the teacher. "I'd like to do it myself. I'll teach. I'll try for sure." Linda had already realized that the chatty Catherine wouldn't leave her alone until she had no more questions to ask. Before the end of the class, the girl from the countryside had time to talk about how she had settled in the dormitory, about how her mother had packed her bales with things, about her nagging neighbors nagging that her shoes were uncomfortable, about the cute students from the parallel group. Discussed the hair color and outfits of all the girls sitting nearby. Even the color of the lecturer's shoes did not escape her keen nose. Linda's head was spinning, but the funny thing was that she wanted to keep talking to this strange lady. There was something about her that Linda was missing. When the class was over, Catherine suggested going to a cafe nearby, saying that she wanted to understand the difference between the cakes made in the city and those made in the countryside. Gradually, Linda and Catherine became such friends that even their teachers began to call them an inseparable couple. Calm, restrained Linda and the volcanic Catherine. Studying wasn't easy. Linda was warned about it, and teachers at school, and her mother. Medicine does not tolerate dilettantes, and students from the first year were driven mercilessly. Sometimes Linda fell asleep over the notes. Her head was swollen from the incredible amount of information crammed in. Early rising on the long road to the institute also exhausted her. But the main thing was that the childhood dream, even if slowly, but approached her. Catherine did not strain herself so much. She often read magazines on the pairs, could oversleep, and in general perceived going to the institute only as an excuse to dress up. "They'll expel you after the first session," sometimes said Linda, careless friend. "Oh, I just need this crust for a beautician," Catherine waved away. "But for a certificate you need to pass the exam, at least a C," braked her Linda. "I have enough knowledge for a C," confidently declared the fashionista from the backwoods. In fact, Catherine was not so lazy. She just had a different picture of the world. Instead of daily cramming, she preferred to stay up the night before the seminar to answer before forgetting what she had read. She took notes from her neighbors and used textbooks and methods to prop up the wobbly table in her room. Catherine was not lazy, and because she immediately began to look for some part-time jobs. More precisely, they found it themselves, that flyers to hand out in the dormitory. That's something somewhere to carry for a small fee. So by the end of the semester, she was invited to work evening shifts as a barista in a small coffee shop. Catherine brewed coffee a little better than the cleaner, but made eyes at all visitors and smiled at 32 teeth. She left good tips, which the girl used to buy cosmetics and new handbags. Directness and simplicity from the backwoods of Michigan broke through where the urban was difficult. Catherine was not afraid to look silly, and it always played to her advantage. She had a goal, too, and the girl was just going about it in her own way. Linda and Catherine were always fun. She knew the latest gossip, kept a lot of funny stories, could quickly make up her friend in the bathroom before class. On one of the frosty days before the session, Linda stood at the bus stop in the morning and waited for the bus. Several other people were crowding along with her. Time was running out, and the bus was still missing. The grannies behind Linda were getting louder and louder. In the end, a man in an old-fashioned fur hat and a briefcase couldn't stand it any longer and asked the driver of the next bus where the number 14 had gone. "They've all been abolished." He shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "Now you go to the center only with transfers." Rumors that the bus would be abolished had been circulating for a long time. But as it happens, everything happened at the most inopportune moment. The man in the fur hat cursed loudly, not embarrassing the passengers, and began to hurriedly call a taxi. Linda realized that she would have to do the same to avoid being late. As luck would have it, the first class was a seminar with a very picky professor who wouldn't let latecomers in. To get to the institute, Linda gave away all her money, even scraped change out of the furthest pockets. She ran into the auditorium a moment before the bell rang and, breathing loudly, flopped down on the bench next to Catherine. "Where have you been?" "I was already thinking about how to get you off." She pounced on her friend with questions. "My bus doesn't run anymore," Linda complained, laying out her notebook. "I have no idea how to get here now. It's either a detour across the city or a taxi." "So you moved to my dorm," Catherine shouted at once. 5 minutes and you're at school. The main thing is not to forget to brush your teeth." Linda wanted to object, but suddenly realized that the idea wasn't so bad. And if she had to choose between getting up an hour earlier and expensive taxes, Catherine and the dormitory won either way. After all, she'd wanted to live on her own for a long time. Student room fees were ridiculous. She spent more on commuting from home, and she could go to her mum's for the weekends. "I just had a neighbor who moved out, so that, as they say, all the cards were stacked." Catherine theatrically raised her hands to the ceiling. "You'll write an application to the commandant, and they'll move you in quickly." Linda nodded. The time that was spent on the road could be used for more useful purposes, studying, walking, and getting enough sleep. The superintendent was a little nagging when she gave her the papers. "What are you doing?" "You're a local. I need to settle non-residents." The girl kept silent, knowing that she was obliged to settle in. The commandant once again looked at her with the look of a dog wanting to put a dog on a passerby in case of something, but there was no such thing. Eventually she accepted the application and told her the move-in date. As soon as they were out of the dormitory, Catherine squeezed Linda so tightly in her arms that she even squeaked. "Yay, yay, we're together now." Her mother took the news of her daughter's future move with enthusiasm. The flat was cozy, but cramped. And that fact, alas, even a mother's love didn't change. "Don't eat anything bad there," Melissa admonished her daughter, putting towels and a new set of bed linen in her bag. "And don't drink. At my place." She shook her fist expressively, but rather jokingly. "Or that Catherine, your girl, will start to influence you badly," continued the woman. "She's fine." Linda defended her friend. "She's just peculiar." A few days later, on a day off, the girl arrived at the dormitory with her things. Catherine was already waiting for her, helped her to bring everything in, to settle in, showed her where everything was. The room was small, but here Linda had her own separate bed, her own desk, a wardrobe shelf, and a whole wall. All in all, it wasn't too bad. The main thing was that it was a couple of minutes from the uni, and the rest would get used to it. In the evening of the same day, Linda and Catherine were walking down the corridor and suddenly they were called. "Hello, girls." A student peeked out of a nearby room. "Hi, Johnson." Catherine turned and tilted her head to the side, like a magpie looking at a shiny bauble. "What do you want?" "Let's join us, because we, the female company, is not enough." The guy waved his hand invitingly. "We'll feed you, we'll drink you, we won't leave you offended. It's our birthday, after all." Linda tugged Catherine's elbow questioningly. "That's Henry Johnson from third year. He's been after me since the beginning of term," she whispered back. "He's not bad, but he's a bit of an oaf." "And you want to go?" Linda took another look at the boy who was persistently beckoning them to come. "Why not?" Catherine stared at her, puzzled. "Tomorrow is Sunday anyway. There's no need to go anywhere. We'll sit, chat, all of us. Nothing to be afraid of." She turned to Johnson. "All right, we'll be there soon, just wait." The guy glowered, gave them a thumbs up and disappeared into the room. Linda hesitated for a moment, but then she thought about it. She hadn't really made friends with anyone except Catherine in 6 months of school. Of course, she'd talked to her classmates, but it wasn't the same. And her old school friends came to visit less and less often and wrote shorter and shorter letters. And they didn't understand why they had to go to an institute on the other side of town. Catherine quickly combed her hair, changed from pajama trousers into jeans, found a decent t-shirt in the wardrobe. Linda didn't bother with that. She just tied her hair up. There were 3 guys and a girl in the room, apparently the couple of the birthday boy, tall, thin as a pole, but very hospitable. An old acquaintance beckoned and greeted the girls and introduced the company. "This is David, the birthday boy, and his Lady Mary. This is Alex, the future of urban medicine." And this Henry jabbed his finger at a boy sitting on a chair by the window, is Ray from the journalism department. The girls were warmly welcomed and seated at the communal table. After a while, the shyness of acquaintance evaporated without a trace. Everyone was drinking, eating, joking. Mary suggested a game of crocodile. The boys readily moved the bed and, making room, Linda stared blankly at all the new acquaintances. Henry was making small talk with Catherine. It was obvious he liked her. He was trying to put his arm around her, brushing invisible dust from her shoulder, scratching the back of her head. David and Mary had been together for a long time. It was obvious from their communication and warmth towards each other. A note of distant envy even ran through Linda's mind. She had dated a guy in high school, but he had never treated her with the care and warmth that these two did for each other. Alex made occasional jokes about doctors. During breaks when his mouth wasn't full of food, he'd already put a couple of ketchup stains on his t-shirt. But would that stop a man with a big appetite? Ray was the only one Henry introduced differently than the others, and he didn't fit at the table. He sat by the window with a plate in his hands. But that didn't stop the young man from collecting all the stares. He told stories, he joked, he asked provocative questions, he posed picturesquely. "Ray's a talker," David snorted. "He's a man who's chosen his profession to scratch his tongue." "I'd rather scratch my tongue than pick at people." The journalism student made a theatrical grin, which immediately caused the company to laugh. "What's wrong with helping people?" Linda suddenly asked. Everyone fell silent and stared at her with interest. Ray also looked at the guest. "Well, you're not going to help them for free. Or are you going to open a branch of the Mother Teresa Society?" He sarcastically teased Linda. "I want to help first of all. I go into the profession by the call of my heart, not because it is profitable," said the girl. "You need to eat, don't you? So stop covering your ambition with charity." Ray waved his hand at her. "Sooner or later, people will become just a means of earning money for you. But some people will make money by talking, and some will see rotten teeth and other unpleasant things in the human body." "Ray, come on, this is the 3rd year you've been arguing with us. All professions are needed and all have their talents." David said conciliatingly, "Let's have a drink and play cards." Linda gave Ray an irritated look, but didn't argue further, so as not to offend the birthday boy. The trouble was, she liked the smug talker. Ray had the typical smarmy looks, chiseled features, dark hair, strong charisma, and a sharp mind. Gradually, the angular conversation blurred and the tension it had created went away. The party had passed midnight when there was a knock on the door. "Sugar," David hissed, "the commandant's here." Before Linda knew it, the table was covered with a sheet. Mary and Alex were tucked under one bed, Catherine and Henry under another, and she and Ray were shoved into the wardrobe. It all happened so fast that hardly a fly could have flown in that time. The commandant's voice was heard, reprimanding David in a half-toned voice for the noise and mess after lights out, while he did his best to demonstrate the supposedly empty room. And so it was, every time. Ray sighed in Linda's ear, Why don't you just pay your aunt a wage? He'll hide us in the cupboards, you idiot. The wardrobe was cramped. Linda felt her back against the guy's chest and almost stepped on his feet. For some reason, her cheeks were flaming and her tongue was lashing out. Ray gently touched her shoulder, as much as he could do while standing in a wardrobe full of clothes. You'll have to excuse me, okay? It's my nature to pick things apart. That was rude. Without turning round, Linda replied. She could feel the guy's guilty, if guilty, breath on the back of her neck. It was getting stuffy. Let's go out tomorrow, and as an apology, you pick where you want to go. Ray put his hand on her forearm. The commandant let go of the last of her nagging remarks, wagged her finger at David, and made to leave. Goosebumps ran up and down his body, hot and cold at the same time. The tension was back in the air, but lingering, enveloping. Let's go, Linda agreed, to the exhibition of contemporary artists at the gallery. All right, I'll be waiting at 17 at the dormitory. The wardrobe doors swung open. Why aren't you two fighting? David chuckled. Almost. Ray was the first to jump out, winking discreetly at Linda. You all right? Why did they put you and that jerk in there? Catherine clucked, giving the boy a stare. I think we're going on a date with that jerk. Linda whispered quietly, trying to hide her red cheeks and the stupid love sparkle in her eyes. Linda, you have golden hands. The grateful patient smiled goodbye and left the office. Linda took off her gloves and nodded to herself in the mirror. It was for moments like this that she had gone to the dentist's office, for grateful looks and sincere appreciation. And she didn't regret the years she'd spent studying. First 5 in medical school, then residency for another 3. Paperwork for the registrar's office. A dressing gown to take home to wash. So what else, Catherine to call? They were supposed to meet today for a professional holiday. Linda threw on her coat, said goodbye to the girls at the reception desk and hurried to the shop for a cake. Catherine had still had a sweet tooth since uni. No one was home to see her yet. Ray warned that he would be at the agency until the evening. He'd started moonlighting there while he was still at school, and 7 years later he'd taken the editor's chair himself. But Ray had connections with every authority in the city, from vegetable stalls to the prosecutor's office. They were married in college, a year after the relationship and that dorm room meeting. Catherine had convinced her that Ray was good, of course, but he was dapper and pays her. Her mother didn't take the journalism profession seriously. What kind of work is it to gather gossip? Like plowing in a factory or sowing grain, that's a job. She snorted when Linda came to visit at weekends and raved about her boyfriend. Ray was not what he seemed at first glance, nor was he what everyone else saw him as. He could be caring and sensitive, and even restrained his desire to pick at everything. At the same time, remained the soul of the company, a noisy lighter. Many girls openly envied Linda and openly glared at Ray when they appeared at the institute. There's nothing to see here, Catherine waved her hands at them. You're not here for the ballet. Shoo. Although she had initially opposed Linda and Ray's relationship, she soon became an ardent defender of their peace of mind and was even a bridesmaid at the wedding. Not without pride, she told the guests that without her the young people would not have met. It might have seemed that Catherine simply had nothing to do. But how wrong were those who thought so? The backwoods fashionista had affairs with 2 or 3 at a time. Never a dull moment in the evening. Sometimes she chose from several candidates and was not ashamed to use her natural beauty. Those problems that she herself did not want to solve suitors. So Catherine finished her studies, not really knowing what she was studying for. She got her medical degree as a working makeup artist. She did not go to any residency and settled in a beauty studio, having mastered in addition to makeup, hair, and other beauty procedures. From boredom, or from flightiness, married, and 6 months later divorced. Another year fluttered on dates and married again. Catherine wasn't lazy, she was just lucky. She was also never shy about doing things that others disapproved of. That's why she won where others failed. Linda sometimes thought that her road was straight and quiet, where you could see all the stops and bumps for miles ahead. Catherine's road, on the other hand, wiggled like a snake and pitted or went under the clouds. The important thing was that eventually they both ended up with a destination. The tea was getting cold. Linda was already thinking of calling her friend, who was almost an hour late, when she heard a fuss in the entrance and a call. "Can you believe it, you bastard?" The client was late. She held me up. Then the taxi was still running. Catherine started to get indignant. Linda only smiled. They hugged. It couldn't have been any other way. In the past few years, Catherine had changed from a strange backwoods girl with ambitions into a genteel city beauty. She had a bob haircut, was always wearing makeup and fashionably dressed, and she was more concerned with a new skirt and going for a massage than having groceries at home. "Oh, you cooked for Ray." Catherine, barely passing into the kitchen, immediately stuck her nose in the pots on the cooker and in the fridge, and she has borscht and stuffed cabbage and compote. Linda did not chase after brands and hairstyles. She dressed minimalistically and simply, but she knew how to keep things cozy and on time. "Harry's nagging at me because I don't cook," Catherine complained. "Everyone has their talents," Linda reassured her as she poured tea. The friendly chat went on late into the night. It was always like this when they met. The cake was almost over and Linda was making coffee for the third time when Ray finally came home. The young editor was disheveled and twitchy. He came into the kitchen to say a quick hello, hugged his wife and retired to his room, saying he'd had a hard day. "Why is he so sour?" Catherine asked, after a glance at the man. "He must be tired." Linda shrugged her shoulders. "I can't force him to sit down at the table." Come on. Catherine jumped up from her chair and reached for her friend's shoulder. "What is this?" She picked up a red hair with 2 long fingernails and showed it to the stunned Linda. She stopped in surprise. Maybe it was an accident? "Yeah. Say it was blown in by the wind. I'm a friend of men. I know them like the back of my hand. He came in tired, with someone else's hair on, and he's working hard, poor man." "What are you implying?" "That he..." Linda looked round the room. "I'm not implying anything yet, but I have the fact on my fingers." Catherine shrugged her shoulders. "We need to watch him. Think back. Maybe you had something strange going on." Linda thought about it. Her friend's suspicions had shifted the bricks of her inner fortress just a little, but it was enough to make the building shake. Ray had replaced in Linda the father she had been deprived of. He became both friend and husband at once. The first years they lived soul to soul, understood each other without words, and as if a whole universe was formed in the merger of 2 dissimilar characters. Then they experienced several crises in their relationship. There were quarrels, as with everyone, but they quickly became the past. For the last year they lived a very measured relationship, but loaded professionally. Both worked hard to achieve their goals. Maybe they started to socialize less. "Is everything okay in bed?" Catherine questioned her. "Well, maybe because of the work became a little less." "Yes," agreed Linda. "Yes, what are you bothering at all? There is one hair, and already panic." "Her hair is where it all starts." Catherine raised her finger authoritatively. "I advise you to go through his pockets, sniff his shirts and his laptop too." "I'm not going to sniff his shirts. What's the big deal?" Linda was indignant, although subconsciously doubts were already clinging to her. "And also go to his workplace. Maybe they have a red-headed student trainee there," she said in a conspiratorial whisper. Catherine said in a conspiratorial whisper. They chatted for a while and Catherine went home. "Yes, Lindochka, I almost forgot. My salon will celebrate the anniversary of the opening. Come with Ray. You're my regular at the Willow and Bath Cafe next week, Friday." "We'll come." Of course, Linda nodded. "Smell the shirts." Catherine winked at her, sent her a kiss and disappeared into the lift. Involuntarily, but Linda began to look at her husband. Until Catherine's words, she had never thought to accuse him of cheating. Of course, this fact was vaguely believable, but still. One evening, Linda went through her husband's things. "God, what am I doing?" she asked herself when she actually sniffed the collar of Ray's favorite shirt. It didn't smell suspicious, and there was no hair either. Linda calmed down and put Catherine's words out of her mind. Catherine is Catherine, and her Ray is not like that. She had long ago accepted his job and the need to socialize with loads of people in a day. Whoever her husband might have had a meeting with. It's all nonsense. Ray, we're all right, aren't we? Linda asked on the way to the cafe. She didn't know why she asked. The inner restlessness hadn't completely gone away. Ray turned to her. Yes, why are you suddenly asking? Why am I asking? Linda wondered. You can't tell me Catherine found the hair. You've been away at work lately. We don't talk much, she said. Lindochka, you know that I have a lot of things to do and responsibilities every day. Soon I'll get an assistant and relax a little. Ray smiled at her. Oh, here we are. Catherine was already waiting for them at the entrance. Apparently drunk and in full battle color, she was friends with the owner of the salon and had even bought a small share of the business from her, so she could invite anyone to the party. Linda sometimes wondered where the careless Catherine got the money for such a thing, but the mystery remained a mystery. The mini corporate party was a lot of fun. The women's company was diluted by a few men: the owner's husband, the masseur's boyfriend, and Linda's and Catherine's husbands. Linda didn't know her friend's new husband. She had only seen him at the wedding and couldn't remember where he had come from. Harry looked frankly bored, constantly attached to glasses of champagne, sighed, and very sluggishly participated in the general celebration. The hostess raffled off certificates for free treatments among the guests. Linda successfully won one of them and hurried to please her husband, who went outside for a smoke. She jumped out of the door and looked around puzzled. The only person outside was Catherine, who was on the phone. Have you seen Ray? Her friend asked her. Catherine put the machine away in her purse. Linda, while you participated in the raffle, your husband doused his trousers with wine and went to change, she shouted. And we, came delivery of new manicure tables. Idiots, they mixed up the days. I'm going to go to the salon to get them so Miranda doesn't freak out. Ciao, Linda. I'll be right back. Have fun. Catherine jumped into a taxi and sped away. Puzzled, Linda dialed Ray, who confirmed that he had doused his trousers, would change and be back soon. Miss me? She heard a voice from behind her. Harry emerged from the doorway. Linda answered it automatically. No. They said hello very crumply for the first few minutes. The girl wondered why her husband had not warned her and left so hastily. Let's talk, shall we? I don't know anyone here but you, and there's nothing to talk about with these chickens from the salon. They're all talking about manicures and new hair colors. He yawned tiredly and flicked his lighter. Come on, Linda agreed, realizing she was in a similar situation. Harry asked about his work, his habits, his studies, but only when he was talking about himself. He complained about Catherine, either explicitly or implicitly. Linda realized he was drunk, but for some reason she listened. She'd never talked to someone in such a way about her friend, as if she'd been given a glimpse into a secret suitcase. She cooks once a week, and then some rubbish that's impossible to eat, and I'm used to home-cooked food. My mom was a cook all her life, Harry sighed. You work here from morning till night. You want borscht, to eat cutlets, pies, and she'll buy salads or dumplings, dear. Ugh. But she puts on makeup for 3 hours. Why did you get married then? Cautiously switching to you, asked Linda. She's beautiful. She's so beautiful. You can't take your eyes off her. When I saw her, everything, the veil covered my brain. But now you realize that you can't eat beauty alone. Harry finished smoking, moved closer and whispered. And I gave her money for a share in that damn salon for some reason. I thought she'd stop hanging around there herself. She'd be home to manage and earn an income. No way. Linda suddenly felt sorry for Harry. She realized that his rose-colored glasses had shattered inside. On the one hand, he'd seen who he'd married, and on the other hand, beauty had always fooled men. I'd like a wife like you, Linda, a calm, responsible, homely woman who's ready to raise children. Not plaster chickens in front of the mirror, Harry said, looking into her eyes. Linda was taken aback and pulled her fingers out of Harry's hands, which he had already managed to grab. I don't think that's a good idea, the girl cut him off. We should have gone back inside a long time ago. She turned and walked quickly into the cafe. Her heart was pounding frantically, her head was full of bewilderment and shame, her ears were ticking. Linda sat down in her seat at the table, and poured half a glass of wine. "Shall I tell Catherine what happened, the complaints, Harry and the fat hints? She'll start questioning him. They'll have a fight, have to stir it all up again." "No, let them deal with their own problems and each other." Linda took a swig of her drink and reached for a sandwich. For some reason, she felt sick to her stomach, and she wanted to hug Ray, but he had disappeared. She phoned. Her husband said he was almost there, but he was stuck in traffic, and finally he walked into the cafe in jeans and a t-shirt. About 10 minutes later, a panting Catherine burst in, desperately arguing on the phone with someone. "What kind of idiots are these? This is not a company, this is a quiet horror. Not only did they come on the wrong day, but they almost hurt me." She pointed to a barely visible bruise on her elbow and an abrasion on her forearm. "I'm sorry it took so long." Linda. Ray hugged her from behind. "The traffic would drive you crazy." "Why didn't you warn me?" Linda asked the girl. "I was standing in the middle of the hall with, pardon me, wet trousers. I don't have time to talk." I hurried to the car and rushed to change my trousers. Ray waved his arms guiltily to the sides. Nearby, Catherine continued to make noise and indignation. Linda calmed down a little when she felt her husband's hand on her arm. On the other side of the table sat a silent Harry, glaring at her through the wall of a clear glass. A few days passed. Linda was finishing up her work at the clinic. She was in a good mood. Her last 8-year-old patient had been a delight to her with his bravery and resilience. He even hugged the doctor's aunt goodbye. And under his mum's proud, embarrassed gaze, he said, "Thank you." Of course, Linda could not just let the little hero leave the office, and handed him a brand new toothbrush, which was left by the brand representative for promotional purposes. The young doctor had already said goodbye to all her colleagues and was standing at the door when the phone in her pocket rang. "Linda, help me out." Catherine's voice came through the phone. "Come as a model. My student and I need to practice, and the model is sick, the bastard." "Now?" Linda was surprised. "Yes, it's urgent." Catherine begged. "Okay, I'll be right there." The girl hung up the phone. Linda often helped her friend. It was not difficult and pleasant. After all, she always came home with beautiful makeup and styling, and Catherine's training was not disrupted. It took Linda about half an hour to get to the salon. She was already waiting, sat in a chair, and under the popular tracks of the radio airwaves, Catherine and her student began to work. The girlfriend was scattered in another round of thanks and scolded the irresponsible model student who didn't show up. When the work was done and the student went home, Catherine suggested that Linda stay and have a cup of coffee. It turned out very well. Catherine looked at the makeup and said, "She's a smart girl. Maybe something good will come out of her." Linda clapped her eyelashes theatrically, turning one side and then the other. At the same time, she caught a glimpse of the old manicure tables. Linda wouldn't have confused them. She'd been to Catherine's workplace so many times she'd already memorized how the tables stood and on which one, how the light from the window fell. "I thought you said you were going to replace the tables." She stared questioningly at her makeup artist friend. "Where are they?" "They turned out to be defective. We sent them back." Catherine waved her hand. "What, all at once?" Linda wondered. "They all had scratched tops. I told you, idiots. Those movers were pounding them against each other like crazy." Catherine brushed the shadow off her friend's cheek with a brush. "Only spoilt our holiday in nerves." "Did they hit you with the tables too?" Linda nodded at the greenish bruise on the makeup artist's elbow. "Yeah." Catherine didn't even look at her arm. "They opened the door as if it were their home. And I got bumped for company." The friends were finishing their coffee and had long ago switched to another topic, when Catherine, who was scrolling through the news feed on her phone, suddenly jumped in. Linda looked. She shoved a machine with a picture open on the screen to Linda's nose. The girl looked at the picture and hesitated. The photo was of the entire staff of the agency where Ray worked. The guys were with some certificates in their hands, apparently another award from the big shots. But another interesting thing was that a young red-haired girl was standing next to Ray. "Aha!" Catherine shouted triumphantly. "I told you so, I told you so." "I told you so," Linda said, looking at the photograph. I felt sick to my stomach. The nasty feeling from her conversation with Harry and the homespun excitement of finding the red hair again. "It's okay, Linda, we'll expose him." Catherine clenched her manicured fingers into a fist. "If anything, you'll be the first to file for divorce." "What divorce, Catherine?" Linda jumped up like a flaming rock. "It's not even clear yet." "It's as clear as day, dear." Your friend folded her arms authoritatively across her chest. "Your ray's gone off and we've got to go over there and pull that redhead's hair out." "Right." Linda clenched her hands on her temples. "I don't believe in this nonsense." "Okay," Catherine agreed. "Watch him very carefully this week. Men always get caught up in the little things." "I will," Linda nodded. She was tempted to give Catherine a hint about Harry's behavior, but she didn't. Resentment could make a mess of things, especially since Catherine was just drawing her own conclusions. A little obsessively, but for now there was no one to take offense at, and nothing to take offense at. Ray was on his usual behavior. Linda, teased by Catherine's confidence, began to surreptitiously watch her husband, something she usually never did. Linda, until that day, had thought that there was no point in restricting the freedom of a partner, forbidding something, scandals or jealousy scenes. She had realized this when she was still a student, although she loved Ray very much, admired him as a man, as a human being. The more control, the higher the probability of the opposite effect, and to arrange emotional swings with a choleric sanguine like her husband, a noisy and dangerous task. Scenes and emotions to that was enough at work. At home wanted to be calm. He said so himself. During the day, the young editor is a chameleon to adjust to anyone who got to his office, and in the evening, at home, wanted to be himself. Feeling like a delinquent schoolgirl, Linda rummaged through her husband's rucksack, his notebook, while he was in the shower. She found a list of phone numbers and women's names on the pages of the notebook, and a strange pink-colored pen in his jacket pocket. Her heart pounded, thudding in her ears, as if it had been covered with a bucket. "Linda, what are you doing?" Ray stood in the doorway, looking at his wife in amazement. The girl froze with the evidence she had found in her hands. "Are you accusing me of something?" The man folded his arms across his chest. "What is it?" Linda jabbed her finger at the list of numbers. "These are the candidates for the assistant position." The man shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "I interviewed them last week. I put them all here. Why?" "Did you use this?" Linda waved a pink girl's pen in the air. "First my own. Then I ran out of paste and Kira lent me her writing utensils. What's the problem? Why are you going through my stuff?" Ray looked round at the slight mess on the desk. Nostrils dilating, Linda felt like a fool. She mumbled something under her breath, slipped the notebook and pen to her husband, and went into the kitchen. His explanations were very convincing, but the worm of paranoia continued to gnaw its way into her thoughts. Linda squeezed her temples with her hands and sat down at the table in the kitchen. She grabbed her phone and texted Catherine about what had happened. The makeup artist didn't believe her friend's husband's excuses and suggested that she follow up with him to be sure. Linda looked at her schedule, figured something out, and texted back. "Come on." Linda went to bed late. Ray was already having his 10th dream when she finally settled down. Before that, she stared at her sleeping husband's face for a long time, trying to find answers to the questions that tormented her. In the morning, she pulled herself together, pretended that nothing had happened, walked Ray to work, and waited for Catherine. Her friend arrived just as Ray drove out of the yard. "You ready?" Catherine's voice had a poorly concealed excitement, as if she'd been waiting a long time for permission. "Do I have a choice?" Larissa looked at her as she buckled her seatbelt in the car. "Well, you might not like what you see if you see anything." Catherine corrected herself, shrugging her shoulders. "But I'd rather not see anything, of course." "He's a little distant," Linda murmured as they caught up with Ray on the road and pulled a few cars ahead of them. He seemed fine, but something was wrong. "That's how it starts," Catherine nodded, looking down the road. "First they get cold feet and then they start lying. Our feminine instincts can't be fooled." Did your previous husband cheat on you? Linda suddenly blurted out for some reason. Katya jerked slightly at the wheel, so surprised by the question. Bill might have cheated, she said uncertainly, but I didn't care anymore. I went out on a date, and I realized I was sick of Bill. Yeah, I felt sorry for him. I didn't tell him, and when he got bored, I filed for divorce. Aren't you afraid that Harry might cheat on you? Linda barely restrained her impulse to spill the truth. Harry? Please. Catherine waved her hand, instantly relaxing. He's in love with me like a dog, always waiting for me. He's not that in love. Linda muttered under her breath so Catherine wouldn't hear. They pulled into the car park outside Ray's work. His car was already there. It was going to be a long ambush. Catherine promptly ran to the nearest stall for coffee and scones. It took until lunchtime to doze in the car. Catherine nudged Linda in the shoulder as Ray came out of the agency with the red-haired girl from the photo. They got in the car and got ready to drive out. Let's go, lovebirds, we'll get them now. Catherine muttered excitedly, twisting the steering wheel. Linda watched her husband's car with bated breath. She recognized the girl in the photo. Ray had said it was his assistant, but was it just that? The answer to that question loomed somewhere on the horizon. The editor and her companion drove down to the city utility into the stationery shop. On the whole, there were no provocative moments, except for the opening of the door. The girl carried a folder of papers, occasionally asking Ray something or answering the phone. He hardly ever took his eyes off the phone, even when he was driving. Yeah, he's holding the door for you. Catherine's eyes widened when she noticed her friend's husband's gesture of kindness. Almost always, Linda replied, following Ray with her eyes. Look, why don't you call him right now, Catherine suggested. Ask him what he's doing and see what the answer is. Linda dialed the number and waited. Ray's phone was busy, but he switched calls almost immediately and picked up. Hi, did you pick up lunch? She blurted out at his hello. No, I'll eat in the canteen. Don't worry, her husband replied in a completely calm voice. All right, Linda stretched out. How was your day? I'm traveling for work. And why are you calling? No reason. Linda sensed that her husband suspected something. I'll see you tonight, bye. Catherine listened to this conversation with her arms folded across her chest. He didn't say he was traveling with a woman. She waggled her eyebrows expressively, hiding. That's right. Her wooden confidence pierced the last shield of doubt in Linda's chest. Why the hell does he even need an assistant? Catherine clasped her hands together. Somehow he's been working on his own for 2 years, and nothing. And now all of a sudden, the ambition of the head of the brain. I don't know. Linda was staring out the window. Tired, I guess. Yeah, from work or your wife. Catherine snorted. Let's go home. Are you drinking white or red? In the evening, Ray found the 2 drunken girlfriends at home. Linda couldn't get Catherine out of the house for about an hour. She was asking for a drink. She was hugging. She was hugging. She was losing something in her bag. Eventually, Harry arrived and took his rambunctious wife himself. He cast a glance at Linda, full of interest and question, and they left. Now her husband seemed to Linda the best and most innocent of men. She fell dreamily asleep, hugging her pillow and whispering something to it with just her lips. Ray sat in the chair and waited for his spouse to fall asleep. He did not scold her, did not lecture her, only set the alarm clock, put a couple of loose pills on the table, and put a glass of water. Then he went out, standing on the threshold of the room as if in doubt, but the second confusion lasted only a moment. The man glanced at Linda, nodded to himself, and closed the bedroom door. Linda became nervous and twitchy. She began to be late for work. For the first time, she snapped at a patient who traveled to her from across town. Linda, maybe you should take a holiday? Sympathetically asked the admin girls at the front desk. Maybe I will, replied the doctor, wrinkling her forehead tensely. She began to notice a cooling in her and Ray's relationship. He hugged her dryly, he forgot the usual little things, or he dropped her calls and called her back. Linda remembered the way the other female students looked at him during their studies. Ray always stood out. He was stately, charismatic, had a great sense of humor, and a sharp mind. Next to him, she, no, but felt sometimes that she was falling short. Over the years, Ray had not lost any of his appeal, and even became even brighter. You've got a payday today. Go to the shopping center, buy yourself something, a dress, shoes, and your mood will improve, advised Linda. It was a good idea. In this turmoil, she had almost forgotten that it was the height of summer, and she didn't have to be cramped with stupid jeans and notorious t-shirts. Linda called Catherine and suggested that they go shopping together after work, but her friend said she was busy and refused. In the shopping center, the windows were full of sale posters. Mannequins towered between the rows of clothes. Linda remembered what trousers and styles of dresses Catherine had advised her the day before and began to walk along the racks. After choosing a few options, she went to the fitting room. What a nice surprise she heard behind her when she came out to assess her outfit in the large mirror in front of the booths. Linda turned around and saw Harry. The man had wandered into the mall, apparently for the same reason she had to update his wardrobe. Well, what a surprise. Linda grumbled, "Hello, Harry. The dress fits perfectly." He gave her a thumbs up, "Don't even think about it." This time he was fresh and had a positive attitude. The old memories that had come alive with his appearance slid unpleasantly down my back. "Linda, I wanted to apologize," Harry began, putting his hands behind his head shyly. "I got drunk in that cafe out of nervousness and fatigue, talking rubbish. I'm sorry, I acted like a complete prick." Linda was surprised, pleasantly surprised. "Okay, it happens. What are you doing here?" She glanced around the shop, as if confirming the question. "I closed a nerve-wracking deal at work, exhaled, and decided to buy something I'd been wanting for a while." Harry nodded at the bag from the hardware shop, and the new jeans are a bonus. Linda looked at the jeans appraisingly. "You take them too, don't think twice." She smiled slightly. Even this sudden company in the form of Harry was somehow to her liking. Maybe it was a distraction from her obsessive thoughts. Maybe she needed a counselor, or maybe it was something else. "Catherine's all worked up, and she won't come with me," he said as they left the shop. "Me too, she's busy today," Linda confirmed. "How about a coffee?" Harry suggested, "or was there something else you wanted to buy?" Larissa thought that the lingerie shopping would have to be postponed and nodded in agreement, approving the idea of coffee at the checkout. At the cafeteria checkout, she dashed over to pay herself, but Harry was the first to arrive and put a flavored drink and a small dessert in front of her, the latter of which Linda hadn't ordered. "Oh, come on. As the husband of my best friend." Harry waved his hand, "We're practically related." He didn't get a chance to say anything before he heard a text message from the bank. "What was that for?" Harry stared sourly at Linda, looking at the balance on the card. "Almost, but not relatives." The girl commented briefly. They chatted, then went back down to the shopping floors and wandered for a long time, choosing one pretty thing or another. Linda sensed that Harry was enjoying himself with her. He didn't turn on that whiner in the cafe anymore, but was cheerful and somehow relaxed at the same time. He talked about all sorts of funny situations at work, reminiscing about old friends and years of schooling. There was even room for a story about his childhood and Harry's fun holidays as a first grader in a small town. Listening to all of this, Linda did the most important thing. She took her mind off the intrusive thoughts of her husband's outings. She had to get home. It was nearing evening and Linda hailed a taxi as they stood at the entrance to the shopping center. "Thanks for the company at the mall," Linda smiled as the car pulled up. "Thank you for the pleasant walk. Maybe we can do it again sometime?" Harry opened the taxi door for her. "It's probably not the right thing to do," Linda hesitated. Harry gave her a quick peck on the cheek and said, "Well, you're a big girl. It's time you prioritized what's right." Linda drove home dazed, outraged, and flattered, a rattling mixture of all the emotions of the last few days. Resentment towards her husband, worry about their private life, irritation, and into all of it sprinkled sparks of innuendo from Harry. It wasn't right. It wasn't nice that she was having coffee with her best friend's husband who was making ambiguous hints to her for the second time. Why? Well, of course she knew why. She knew that she loved Ray. She knew that she valued Catherine as a friend and loved one, and she knew that she wasn't ready to go for what Harry was veiledly offering her. All plain and simple. But then why is she flattered by his attention? Is it not compensation for a grudge from Ray? How long has it been since he spent almost half of his day off with her? The more Linda thought about it, the more the questions became, leading her into the wilds or to an unpleasant crossroads. Tomorrow I'll talk to Ray straight, Linda decided, and I'll tell Catherine the truth about her husband. That'll be the right way to prioritize. The next day Linda had few patience, so she got off early after work. On the way she received a call from a nervous Ray, asking her to bring the work phone she had forgotten at home. On the way she thought about the best words to say to her friend and her husband. She decided to start with the first one. She dialed Catherine's number and proposed to meet in the evening. The makeup artist happily sang into the phone about her agreement and even asked if she should dress up. "No, we'll just sit around," came the reply. As Linda entered the flat, she heard Ray's work phone ringing. She picked it up from the mirror in the hallway and glanced absently at the screen. There were about 10 missed calls. "Will computers? Information bridge," Linda mumbled, flicking through the screen on her smartphone. She was already getting into a taxi when a text message sent around 1 o'clock in the morning caught her eye. "I missed you, my affectionate boss. Looking forward to tomorrow." Linda felt as if she had been splashed with cold water. There it was. Her suspicions, here in her hands on the screen of her husband's phone. Tears welled up in her eyes, her nose stung, and her throat was filled with rage and jealousy. Linda caught her own gaze in the rearview mirror and was taken aback. She was looking at an angry and deceived woman who wanted revenge and justice. All plans to talk to her husband were forgotten in a moment. "Boss," Linda hissed, clutching the phone so tightly that it almost cracked. The taxi driver involuntarily glanced at the passenger. He could sense with his spinal cord that something was going on behind him. The only thing the girl managed to do before jealousy finally drowned her in its cauldron was to write down the number the text message had been sent from. Linda burst into the agency's office with flaming cheeks. The staff said hello to her, but the girl didn't hear. She yanked Ray's office door open to the astonished stares, but it wouldn't budge. "Ray," at lunch, said a fellow journalism student timidly, emerging from the right. He was the first one to catch Linda's furious gaze. "We'll wait for him here." Linda glanced angrily at the assistant's empty chair next to the office and plumped down in her chair, tapping her fingers on the desktop. The whole office stared at her with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. Someone had apparently called Ray on the sly, and he came rushing in a few minutes later. "How's it good, sweetheart?" Linda got up from her chair and angrily shoved the phone screen with the message into his nose. At the same time, she glared angrily at Kira, who was frozen in the doorway behind the boss with a stack of documents. "Linda, what's the gig?" Ray tried to pull his wife into the office. "Come on, let's talk calmly." Linda pulled out of her husband's arms and expressively raised her hand with the phone, showing it to the whole office. "No, why? I want everyone to know what a wonderful person you are." She emphasized the word wonderful, a decent boss and a faithful husband. Ray clutched his head, feeling Spanish shame for his wife. "And you should be," Linda pointed her finger at a stunned Kira, "ashamed of yourself for messing around with a married man." "Linda, stop it." Ray grabbed his wife in an arm and dragged her forcefully into his office. Let me go, you traitor." Linda lashed out, hitting her hand on the door. Annoyed Ray sat his wife in his chair and loomed over her. "What did you do? And even if it's such an emergency, why the show? What are you trying to accomplish?" Linda looked at him with eyes red with rage and tears. She shoved the work phone and the message on it in her husband's face again. "How do you explain this? Sleeping with your young assistant, huh? That's it. The old wife is no longer honored." "Linda, have you lost your mind?" Ray rubbed the bridge of his nose and exhaled. Somebody obviously got the wrong number in the heat of the moment. "I even know." Linda crossed her arms over her chest, That red head with the hair you come home with. Jesus, don't you have anything better to do than look for other people's hair on my shirts? Ray rolled his eyes. Find something more productive to do. And Kira has a fiancé, just so you know. And you call your Kira's number, and we'll find out if she's wrong or not. Linda demanded with clenched fists. Everything inside her was boiling with rage and responded with a new wave to every phrase of her husband. Her back was soaked, her cheeks and forehead were burning. Ray picked up his work smartphone and pressed the speakerphone during a call. The answering machine's electronic voice came through the receiver. It rang several times, but to no avail. That doesn't prove anything, Linda said. Linda, go home. Please stop embarrassing me in front of my subordinates, Ray asked in a very firm, quiet voice, turning away to the window. The girl felt that her claims were being ignored, that it was as if everyone was laughing at her in her voice without being embarrassed about it. Why did it say the word supervisor? She threw back at Ray, grabbing the doorknob. I have no idea. As if there weren't enough bosses in town, Ray replied without turning round. Linda stepped out of her husband's office, and a dozen curious eyes stared at her. She walked briskly down the corridor, not looking at anyone, and on the way out of the building she saw Kira standing by the car park. She was being hugged and apparently comforted by some guy. Linda froze for a moment, and then shame came over her in a wave that burned her from the inside out. Tears held back for so long tore down the barrier and dripped from her eyes. It's okay. Linda. Catherine counted drops of valerian. Men, they are so dodgy, cunning, but do not cry because of it. Appreciate your dignity. She handed Linda a glass of water and a sedative. Catherine arrived as soon as she heard her friend's unintelligible voice mixed with crying. Catherine, I've embarrassed him. She took the glass with a shaky hand, and him and me. I'm anticipating a story on their website editor's sleep-deprived ex-wife breaks into office. Oh my God, that's embarrassing. Linda was in tears again. She hadn't been able to calm down for about an hour. Well, Catherine said, at least you're remembered. Why do you have to go there anyway? I'm such an idiot. Linda leaned into her friend's shoulder. We're all a little bit stupid. Catherine gently put her palm on her head. Why did you call me this afternoon? Linda realized that she couldn't handle another confrontation today. I just wanted to chat, she said, maybe go shopping. Well, we're not going out now. No foundation can hide your puffy eyes. I'm telling you as an expert. Catherine raised her finger to the ceiling, which made Linda smile a little. What are you going to do about Ray? I don't believe in random messages. I don't know, maybe I'm just really paranoid. Linda leaned back against the sofa and stared at the ceiling. If so, I should apologize. I'd still dig. Catherine did not stop. It would be reckless of him to sleep with his almost secretary. It's like a joke situation. There's someone else, that's for sure. I'll talk to him, Linda breathed out, if I could. For some reason, she dialed the number she had copied from her husband's phone again, and once again it was answered by the monotonous muttering of an electronic robot. Ray came home late that evening, but Linda still waited for him. Her husband looked at her glumly and, without a word, left for the shower. Ray, I'm sorry. Linda waited for him in the room. The man walked past her, shaking his head. I'll forgive you, Linda, but my reputation is ruined by your tantrum today. There'll be whispers behind my back, and I gave Kira the day off. I was wrong, Ray. Linda stared sorrowfully at the floor. I'm so ashamed. I was so ashamed. Ray sat down on the other side of the couch. You've turned into some kind of paranoid neurotic, haven't you? Going through my things, sniffing my hair, doing this and that, because of some stupid mistake by some stranger, whoever the hell she is. It just seemed to me that our relationship had grown cold, Linda murmured quietly. When it seems, darling, it's customary to cross yourself, Ray muttered. You're playing the jealous wife, aren't you? The idea had failed. But Catherine said, Linda began. Oh, you and Catherine should be in the yellow ward together with ideas like that. Her husband came at her again. She doesn't know what she's listening to. She can't see what's under her nose, but she's giving you the best advice. She herself has a husband who walks left and right. All of a sudden, Ray stopped halfway through the sentence. It looked as if he'd said something unnecessary, and now he was trying to figure out how to put it back. Linda's ears perked up. Anyway, the man squeezed the bridge of his nose with his fingers and closed his eyes. Take a sedative and don't talk to Catherine about any of this nonsense. She's a bad influence. Ray got up and left the room, signaling that the conversation was over. Linda was left sitting alone in the dark, confused and full of doubt. Ray knows something about Harry but keeps quiet, male solidarity or something. And why is he suddenly so against Catherine? The tormented Linda paid no attention to her husband's real coldness and his blatant unwillingness to address the problem and forgive her. A week passed. Life went on as usual. The head doctor of the clinic informed Linda that she and 2 other young dentists were going to a 3-day conference in another city. The girl was even a little happy about this turn of events. It might help her take her mind off her worries, although outwardly no one would have found any reason to do so in Linda's life. Her husband was friendly to her. Catherine still called and chattered like a magpie about everything. The patients hadn't decreased. But behind the outer mask of normality was the affable coldness of her husband, a girlfriend drowned in rhinestones, and a job that suddenly became exhausting and drained all her energy. Linda could never find the strength to talk to her friend about her spouse. She had no proof on her hands except her own words. No, enough with the suspicions. I'd better get my own family in order first. Ray agreed that the trip would be good for his wife and even bought her a train ticket. Go listen to some smart guys and aunts, go for a walk, and get all the nonsense out of your head, he told Linda as she packed her traveling bag. The train was tapping its wheels. The girl rarely traveled by train, and each time it was a bit of a novelty. Colleagues were arguing animatedly nearby to the clinking of the glass of the cup holders. Maybe Ray's right, I am paranoid. He and I have been together since we were 18, and there's never been any occasion, Linda thought, looking out the window at the passing railway stations and Christmas trees. And the amount of stares at him at uni, I didn't care then, well, hardly. Yes, it's all Catherine's way of panicking herself and others. Whether it was the monotonous choo-choo-choo that chased away the bad thoughts or the atmosphere of the journey, Linda was in a pleasant mood. She put her head down on the iron and freshly laundered linen. I'll be back and we'll definitely go to Grandma's in Iowa, Linda decided and closed her eyes. Training in the company of the sea and the sun really did the girl good. In the morning, she and her colleagues listened to seminars of experienced doctors and presentations of new materials for work, and in the afternoon they went to the beach to sunbathe and swim. The sea climate and fresh air seemed to erase her worries from her mind. Linda thought about how she would return home, how she would tell Ray about the trip, how the 2 of them would go to the place where the malachite was mined. It's a shame Catherine isn't with me, the girl thought as she watched the waves. She said she hadn't been to the sea for a couple of years. Linda really wanted to share her peacefulness with her loved ones. After all, her colleagues were only colleagues. On the 3rd day, the organizers said that the last speaker couldn't come due to illness, apologized to the participants and informed them that the training was closed. Linda decided not to stay one more day in the hotel with the others, but bought a ticket on the same day and went home. Here's a surprise for Ray, I'll be home early. And with a tan too, she smiled as she looked out the window at the sea. The train arrived at its destination early in the morning. On the journey, Linda had a nice chat with her neighbor and her grandson of 9 years. Granny treated the girl to fruit and enjoyed listening to her stories about work, recalling her own youth. The morning city was just waking up, washed by the night rain. It was not as warm as the sea, and even a little fresh. Outside the window of the taxi passed sleepy alleys and early joggers. In the alleys, the first rays of sunshine dispersed the foggy remnants, played in the puddles and glimmered drops on bushes and tree branches. The taxi driver helped her unload her bag, wished her a good day, and drove off to his new passengers. Linda thought about how she would go up to the flat, go in quietly and get into bed with Ray asleep. How nice that today was her husband's day off and they would be able to sleep through lunch together, then make coffee and talk about the upcoming trip. Linda quietly turned the key in the lock so as not to wake Ray. Quietly, she walked into the flat, and as soon as she saw the familiar corridor, she was dumbfounded. All the good cheer she'd brought with her from the sea had gone down and shattered into tiny pieces. Her heart pounded like the wheels of the train that had brought her back here. There were shoes lying in the corridor that she would have recognized out of 100. They'd bought them together last year and had picked up the last pair in town. The shoes were Catherine's. By the mirror, however, Linda saw her keys and the same painfully familiar car fob. For a moment, a childish, naive thought crept into her head. Maybe something's happened and Catherine's come to ask for help. But the thought was immediately suffocated by the falling curtain of obviousness. From the bedroom, Linda heard soft voices. It seemed to her that her heart was pounding so that the neighbors could hear her. The girl crept quietly to the door and froze, listening to what was going on behind it. I almost talked him into buying me the salon outright from Miranda. A familiar female voice sounded. Will you get a divorce as soon as the deal is official? The husband's voice answered him. The same day. When are you going to file the papers? I'm thinking of what to tell her, followed a sigh. The idea of a fake affair has failed. It failed because someone left their work phone at home, the woman's voice interrupted. I've been working her as hard as I can. A little bit more, and she would have filed for divorce herself. We would have come out dry. And now you either have to talk to her head on, or think of something else. In the forehead is a pity. I don't like her as a woman, but as a human being, I pity her. And it is not a pity to make a show, smirked a female voice. I choose the lesser of two evils, said the male voice. Linda clamped her hands over her mouth and felt the corners of her eyes grow wet. A wave of cold swept down her back, her cheeks felt hot, and her throat felt like it was being squeezed by invisible hands. The realization fell in pieces, and each was nastier than the last. It burned, drained away all the good inside, like acid. Ray, you and I tried it back in college, but you were too right then, and I was too stupid. But if it had worked, then, Catherine's voice sounded quietly, but ingratiatingly, might not have been these long years with a bore from the dentist. My husband might not have been there, and now everything would be easier, and we'd be living somewhere abroad by now. If everything works out, it will Ray confirmed. We'll run the salon remotely. You run the salon and I'll run the agency. Linda felt the tears wet her t-shirt and imprinted hot drops on her chest. We'll be gone, and they might have something with Harry. I've seen the way he looks at her, he chuckled from behind the door. I've seen the way he looks at her. She's the perfect girl for Linda. She loves dumplings, borscht, and watching soap operas at night. She's always been a little short for you. She loves her job and doesn't like herself very much, said Ray. We live like neighbors. I'm tired of the homegirl who always has everything planned. I feel like an old man around her. I want something different. I know what you want, Ray. What do you want, Ray? Catherine cooed. From across the room there was a commotion. Linda sat against the wall outside the door, shaking with shame, pity, disgust, resentment, and betrayal of the two people she thought were closest to her, after her mother. The last bit of realization poured out. The cup was empty. The cold hands of reality finally closed around her throat. She jumped up and flung herself out of the flat in what she was wearing. The street, the morning, Linda ran away from the shame and disgrace she had lived in for so many years. She was disgusted with her own existence. She wanted to forget, to erase her memory. She wanted to go back 10 years, to pull her hand out of Catherine's fingers, to send the smug, insolent man to the dormitory. Every year that passed was like a rod whipping her in the back, leaving deep wounds and triple the pain that came on more and more. Tears welled up in her eyes. Everything was cloudy and barely recognizable. She stopped, breathed, and ran again. She was shouted at by passers-by, but Linda didn't hear, didn't see. She wanted to hide from this vile feeling, from herself. Girl, look out, was the last shred of reality that imprinted itself on her memory before pain and darkness overrode her. The measured sounds of the PI snapped Linda out of oblivion. She also thought irritably, what was that nasty beeping sound like the trills of an electronic alarm clock from the past? Her eyes struggled to open, her body felt woozy, her right leg felt petrified and wouldn't move. My entire right side responded with painful tightening when I tried to turn around on the bed, and my head was buzzing. "Good morning. You're finally awake, Linda," greeted her by a woman in a white dressing gown. Linda looked around and only then realized she was in a hospital bed. What happened to me? She looked at the leg in a cast sticking out from under the blanket. "You were hit by a car. I'm surprised you got away with a broken leg, mild concussion, and moderate bruises," the doctor replied. Looking through the documents, they pick up other people in pieces in such cases. "You were born with your shirt on. Your family will be happy to know that you'll be well soon." Not all the family. Linda turned her back to the wall. "Is there someone coming to call your relatives?" the doctor asked. "Tell my husband I was hit by a car and I'm dead. I can't go back. I don't want to see him again, and I don't want to see her," Everlinda said, without turning round. The doctor shook her head. "If they come, don't let them in my room," Linda added. The hospital was dreary, but the walls with the red cross seemed to shield her from the painful thoughts of what had happened. The physical pain didn't seem to bother them much in the face of how much their souls were torn. Her mother rushed to the hospital half an hour after the call. She first cringed, then cursed, then cried at her daughter's bedside. Linda told her everything she had heard that morning. When Melissa left her daughter's room, she gave the nurses each a box of chocolates, and on pain of complaining to the head doctor, ordered her not to let anyone with names beginning with the letters R and K see her daughter. Linda blocked the numbers of her husband and the lying friend. She asked her mother and a colleague friend to collect her belongings from her husband's flat when he was away. Doctors said rehabilitation would take about 3 weeks and the fracture would finally heal in 3 months. One day there was a knock on the door of the room. Linda thought it was one of the staff, although they usually didn't bother to knock. "Come in," the girl shouted, not looking away from the magazine her mom had brought. "Hello, Linda," came a familiar voice. Harry stood in the doorway with a bouquet of flowers and a dressing gown thrown over his shoulders. Linda had mixed feelings when she saw her ex-girlfriend's husband. On the one hand, he reminded her of what had happened, but on the other hand, he had nothing to do with it. "You don't know how hard it took me to get here," the man complained, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "It's almost like they're checking IDs to get to you." "That's my request," Linda nodded. "Why? Are you hiding from someone?" Harry joked. "Maybe I am," the girl confirmed. Harry stared at her in surprise, his eyes wide with question and incomprehension. Linda exhaled and decided to tell him. She recalled everything, including Catherine's outings at the Institute, her consumerist attitude to men, and her hypocrisy under the mask of her friend. Harry listened with his mouth open. "I want you not to fall victim to their game like I did. Get a divorce soon and don't listen to any pleas. Don't you dare buy the salon. Catherine is using you and has used you. Linda's done." "Where did you?" A stunned Harry couldn't believe his ears. They talked about it for a long time. The girl asked the man not to tell anyone where she was or what was wrong with her, and not to do anything stupid that would ruin his life. Towards the end, when Harry was about to leave, he asked, "Linda, tell me, do I have a chance?" "Not now," she shook her head. "I want to be alone. Maybe, in the future, maybe." "I get it. Get well soon. I'll be stopping by if you don't mind." Harry nodded. "Come over." She blinked, showing agreement. Time goes differently in a small town than it does in a big city. It's measured and quiet. The hustle and bustle is alien to those who are used to getting up to the crowing of the rooster. A light frost touched the rowan berries, which shone brightly against the snow. The snow itself sparkled in the sunlight, still fresh and unmarred by anyone's feet and paws. "Granddaughter, there's a letter for you," Grandmother Emma shouted, coming into the hay and waving the envelopes. "Thank you," Linda shouted from the kitchen. She was preparing a simple breakfast for herself and Grandma. "It's been a long time since I've seen a letter," Grandma Emma said, sitting down on her stool. "You young people are all calling now. A letter from some fiancé." She handed Linda an envelope. She took a quick glance at the sender's name and decided to read it later. After her recovery, Linda went straight to her grandmother's house in the country. She could not stay in the city, where every street reminded her of the betrayal and shame she had experienced. She quit her job, settled other minor issues, and made her mother her representative in the divorce proceedings so that she would not have to face Ray again. Out of sight, out of mind, her mother said as she saw her off. Go as far as you like and come back as often as you like. Only call me often. It was quiet in the village, where the pain began to subside and gradually recede. Time was doing its work healing the wounded soul. Her mother didn't talk about Ray and the divorce, only promised to tell me when it was all over. The envelope had an address and Harry's name on it. How he knew where to find her remained a mystery. Linda ran her eyes over the lines Harry had written about the divorce, about leaving Catherine with almost nothing. She consciously skipped that part of the letter. Dear Linda, I realize I'm probably an extra person in your life, but since that evening in the cafe, you haven't left my mind. I've made a lot of mistakes and missed a lot of chances, but I don't want to let you go. The girl paused, listening to herself. Something faintly trembled in her after those words. I'm willing to wait as long as you say. I hope for a reply, Harry. Linda folded the letter, tucked it away in an envelope, and began to twirl it in her hands. If she was still in doubt at the hospital, she knew for sure now. Grandma Emma came into the room. Do you think what to write back? Questioned the old woman, looking at the concentrated face of her granddaughter. I think that old admirers are not invited to a new life. Linda smiled at her grandmother as she tore open the envelope. She tossed the scraps into the bin and looked out the window. Grandma, the neighbors here probably to ask about Daisy again. They're so restless. They'll heal the animal. The old woman shook her hands and shuffled into the hay. Olivia was beginning to lose patience. She'd been preparing for this evening since yesterday, shopping, cleaning the apartment, preparing all sorts of appetizers and entrees for the family and friends. And now she was sitting there listening to her husband mock her. Adrian has an amazing ability to find a flaw in everything. Moreover, this gift is revealed in the presence of strangers, and when she and her husband are alone, more sensitive, loving and affectionate husband cannot find. But when the third, fourth, 10th person showed up, he was a fountain of sarcastic remarks about Olivia. This time she was the protagonist of the bad joke. I passed by a hairdresser's yesterday, Adrian said. Looking out the window, my wife was sitting in a chair, and the master was working on her. I think I'll wait. She comes out, and what do you think? A bald haircut. His sister Emma chuckled, running her spoon into the salad bowl to make herself a Caesar dressing. I wish they'd shaved her bald. Adrian laughed, and that laugh was like a sharp arrow through Olivia's body, electrocuting her brain and making her tense. She'd been dyed red. You wouldn't believe it, her hair was the color of copper wire. What about you? My mother-in-law asked, snacking on a ham and cheese roll. I'm sure I kicked her back to the hairdresser's to change her hair color. Yeah, now. So she can pay those barbers and hairdressers again? I made her dye her hair at home. If you look closely, you can even see that not all of her hair is dyed. There's copper coming through, look closely. The guests laughed, eyeing Olivia's hair, and she sat there red with embarrassment. Every time Adrian mocked her, she wanted to get up and leave. One time she had done just that, but then there had been such an enormous scandal. You have no respect for my family. Adrian yelled. They don't come to visit us often enough to be disrespected like this. How could you do this to them? Olivia stood there like a delinquent child with her head down, unable to say anything to her husband. She regretted leaving the table 100 times over. She should have been patient. But this time the cup of patience was overflowing. No, she would not repeat the last attempt and leave the living room at the table she herself had lavishly set and her husband's relatives feasting. But she had to stop this bacchanalia, or it would never end. When the guests were a little tired of laughing at the color of Olivia's hair, poured the liquor into shot glasses and started snacking again, she said. The other day I went to the orphanage where your children live. I looked at them, brought gifts and sweets. You know, they're so cute. Why don't we take them for the weekend? The principal said it's possible. The room fell silent. The room fell silent as they heard Olivia's words. She raised her glass of wine as if nothing had happened. "Adrian, let's drink to the children you abandoned. I wish them to find decent parents, more worthy than you." A second later, her husband's heavy hand came down on her cheek. Her face flamed, burning as if it had been scorched by 100 tongues of flame. Adrian reached up, grabbed her hair roughly, and pulled her away from the table. During her happy student years, Olivia fell in love. Kieran was 2 years older than her and had already graduated from the military academy. He was as handsome as God, and when Olivia saw him in his uniform for the first time, the ground swam under her feet. He was tall, slender, with radiant brown eyes that looked like velvet, and he seemed to her like a man of unearthly beauty. They met on May Day in the city park. Olivia and her friend Mel were walking along an alley. The weather lavished the small riverside town with sunshine and warmth. A light breeze fluttered the white silk scarf around Olivia's neck. Suddenly it flew off her shoulders, carried by the wind, and flew away. Oops, the girl caught herself and rushed after him. She ran, and the handkerchief fluttered and fluttered in the wind. As soon as the airflow subsided a little, it dropped to the pavement next to the strange guy. He picked up the silk scarf and held it out to Olivia. "Is it yours?" the boy asked, not even thinking to address the strange girl as you. "Yes, thank you," she replied, and reached out to take the handkerchief, but he suddenly hid it behind his back. "Favorite thing?" the guy asked, smiling an open, slightly joking smile. "Grandma's present ... Can I have it?" "Of course you can," he answered. "Only in exchange for your name." "My name's Olivia. Give me the handkerchief." "That's a beautiful name. Why are you so scared? I won't eat your grandmother's gift after all." The stranger smiled, and Olivia felt so awkward that she was ready to turn around and leave the handkerchief and run out of the park. Seeing her confusion and embarrassment, the guy decided not to torture the girl any longer, spread the silk and gently lowered the handkerchief on Olivia's shoulders. "I'm sorry if I scared you or hurt you." "I didn't mean to," he admitted. "I was just walking alone in the park. It's a holiday, springtime, everyone's happy, having fun, going on rides. I'm Kieran." The guy held out his hand to her, and Olivia instinctively offered hers. His palm was warm. "Can I keep you company, or can you keep me company?" "I see you're out alone," too, Kieran said. "No, I'm with a friend," Olivia said, pointing toward Mel, who was standing nearby. She saw Olivia waving her hand and walked over to her friend and the strange guy. "Girls, let's have some ice cream." Kieran suggested it. "My treat." The company headed towards the summer cafe. Kieran turned out to be very sociable, cheerful, and confident. After ordering ice cream for himself and the girls, he asked, "Are you students?" "Yes, we study at the Teacher Training Institute," Mel answered, flipping her leg over her foot so that her already short skirt almost completely exposed her thigh. Kieran's gaze caught the lacy elastic of the stocking, and Olivia noticed it. Mel's doing her thing. She's going to start seducing Kieran, she thought. Olivia and Mel had been friends since freshman year. They were always together. Everyone around them wondered what could bind these two very different girls so tightly together. Mel was bright, even a little flashy. Long black hair flowing down her back almost to her waist. Fashionable clothes, chiseled figure with a narrow waist and lush breasts attracted the eyes of guys. And the girl knew her strengths and never missed a moment to use her feminine charms. Olivia was the opposite of her. She dressed modestly but tastefully. Her straw-colored hair was always braided or arranged in a bun at the back of her head. Her face was almost completely devoid of makeup, and her unremarkable, ordinary figure. Nothing made her stand out from the other students at the Pedagogical Institute. Mel was just suffocating, dying from the lack of male attention. "I should have gone to law school," she complained. "There are plenty of guys there, but in our group there are 2 nerds with glasses, and the rest are all girls." "Did you see the competition for law school?" Olivia asked her. 38 people per seat. You're retaking your history of literature exam for the 3rd time, and you're still talking about law school. No, Mel, you would definitely fail the entrance exams for lawyers. Her friend understood this and only sighed, listening to the lectures without much interest. But she found a way to stay visible. At lunchtime, Mel went to the cafeteria of the neighboring building, where mostly boys studied. This way, she often managed to make new acquaintances and even short-term, non-committal romances. When Kieran told a little about himself and the girls learned that he was graduating from the military academy, Mel's interest in the guy grew exponentially. "What do the officers do for fun?" she asked Kieran. "Just like everyone else," the boy answered. "They go to the movies, meet and date girls, go for walks. I like to go to the skating rink in winter and sometimes play hockey with the guys." "For me, sports are a punishment," Mel said, her red lipstick on her chubby lips. "And movies are boring." "What do you do for fun?" Kieran asked. His question was directed at both girls, but he was looking at Olivia. The velvet gaze of his brown eyes made her a little embarrassed. And Mel rambled on. "I love parties. I went to one recently, invited by some guys from the physical education department. Music, wine, rock and roll. We had a great time." "Do you go out?" The question was directed at Olivia, but Mel didn't give her a chance to keep the conversation going. Nah, Olivia here prefers to read romance novels and cram for notes. I barely even got her out today. It's a crime on May holidays when everyone is out enjoying the warmth and spring sunshine, walking around with balloons and flags, having fun, to sit at home and read books. Stop it, Olivia tried to stop her, but Mel couldn't be deterred. "I also really like picnics," she said cheerfully. "How do you feel about going out, Kieran?" "I'm fine with it," he answered, not taking his eyes off Olivia. "Why not, if there's some meat marinated with spices, a bottle of red wine, and good company?" "It's decided. Let's go to the countryside together," Mel suggested. Olivia looked at her reproachfully. How could she impose on a guy she didn't know? But to her surprise, Kieran agreed very willingly. "Next Sunday we can go to the river," he said. "You owe us appetizers, we owe you meat and wine." "From who, you?" Olivia didn't understand. "You're the one who calls yourself you?" "No, of course not," the boy laughed. "It just occurred to me to bring a good friend of mine along." They finished their ice cream and walked around the park some more. Kieran asked for Olivia's phone number as he said goodbye to the girls at the exit. The girl took out a small notebook from her purse, wrote down her home number, and tearing out a sheet of paper, gave it to Kieran. "Where do you think you're going, girl?" Nicole asked Olivia as she watched her granddaughter pick up the cheese and sausage sandwiches and put them in a container. "Mel and I and the two boys are going to the river," Grandma Olivia said cheerfully. "We're going to grill kebabs and have fun." "I'm glad. It's high time you had a rest. You've been sitting at home like a recluse." Olivia threw on a light jacket over a white knit sweater, laced up her sneakers, and gave her grandmother a peck on the cheek. "Bye, Grandma. Don't miss me," she said. "Go with God, dear." The pensioner closed the door behind her granddaughter. Everything that was happening in Olivia's life worried her. Nicole had raised the girl alone since she was 5 years old. The woman's son and his wife had died, and she had gone completely gray overnight. It is not known how Nicole would have survived the death of her only son and his wife if she had not had a granddaughter in her arms. It was not easy, but she raised the girl in care and love. A former teacher of Russian language and literature, she was proud that Olivia followed in her footsteps and also decided to become a teacher. "When she graduates from college, she will go to work at the school and help me," Nicole thought, looking out the window as her granddaughter walked across the yard with a small leather backpack on her shoulder. Mel caught up with Olivia on the way. They were walking together to the bus stop where they were supposed to meet the guys. "Did you like Kieran?" Mel asked her friend. "Seems like a nice guy," she replied vaguely. "How complicated things are with you, Olivia," exclaimed the girl. "What do you mean good? I mean, do you like him as a man?" "I don't know. I like him a lot. Strong, handsome, sociable, and a military man. I wish I could marry him and become a general's wife." Olivia laughed at her friend's so far-reaching plans. "To become a general's wife, you must first marry a lieutenant. I don't remember where I heard this clever phrase. I don't mind. Kieran and his buddy were already waiting for them at the bus stop. They had backpacks and a collapsible barbecue in their hands. "Hi, girls," said Kieran. "Meet Adrian. Mel. Olivia." "Nice to meet you," Adrian smiled, looking at his girlfriends without embarrassment. "So are we going?" Kieran asked. The company headed towards the forest belt, beyond which the river flowed. The forest path was winding, leading deep into the forest, enticing the boys with the singing of birds and the sound of wind in the pine crowns. The place where the girls were led by the boys was very beautiful. The bank of the river, covered with young green grass, was strewn with dandelions. The rays of the sun were reflected in the water with shining sparkles, shimmering and rippling. The boys gathered wood from the forest and built a fire in a small brazier. The girls spread a blanket on the grass and laid out snacks. While Kieran put the meat on skewers, Adrian poured wine into plastic cups and served it to the girls. "Victory Day is coming up," he said. "I propose to drink to the military men who gave peace to our country." "Great toast," Kieran seconded, but not very polite. "Why is that?" Adrian didn't understand. "Because when there are girls in the company, the first toast is always to Mel ladies." Kieran looked meaningfully at Olivia. She seemed to him the heroine of a fairy tale. Her hair seemed golden in the bright sunlight, and her eyes were even more blue, like water in a river. "And we don't pretend to be superior at all, so I suggest we combine the two toasts and drink to the military women who helped the bravest and most courageous men to defeat the enemy." "What amazing ingenuity," Mel praised Adrian. The guys drank wine, chatted merrily, and enjoyed a pleasant conversation. The meat turned out very juicy and flavorful. The girls praised Kieran, who had prepared his own marinade for the kebab. "Yes, Kieran has many talents," Adrian said. "He is exceptional in general." "And what is his exclusivity?" Mel asked. "Tell me. We know almost nothing about him or you." "What can I tell you? He's a fine fellow. He'll make a model officer. Kieran is a man of his own principles, which I would not advise you to compromise." "What kind of principles?" Mel asked. "For example, he won't lend money on principle. It's true, girls, you can't ask him to die." I even took offense at him at first. What's wrong with helping a friend? And a friend could spend less money, instead of throwing it away left and right. Adrian smiled and rebuked Kieran for his wastefulness. "He also believes that marriages are made for great and pure love." "Isn't it?" Kira argued with his friend. "How can you create a strong family if you don't love a person?" "Come on," Adrian grumbled. "Love is pure chemistry. You meet someone, look into his eyes, and a chemical reaction takes place, and then..." "And what next?" Mel looked at the boy who spoke so boldly about love. "And then the brain shuts down, and uncontrollable things happen." Adrian rolled his eyes amusedly. "Euphoria engulfs two people who are drowning in each other's arms. And then children. Common life, constant lack of money, snot, diapers, work, pots and pans, laundry. In short, this is how what in our world is called family life begins." Everyone laughed merrily at the theatricality of Adrian's speech. He was generally good at joking, easily picking up on any topic, and was cheerful throughout the picnic. Kieran, on the other hand, seemed thoughtful. He was watching Olivia very closely. Noticing this, she began to feel uncomfortable. She stood up and walked toward the river, squatting down and touching the water with her hand. "Cold?" She heard Kieran's voice behind her. Olivia stood up and turned around. "Not really, but it's too early to swim." Kieran, Adrian shouted, "Can't you swim across the river?" "What do you want to bet?" Kieran asked. "Easy." Adrian approached his friend. "Or can't you do it?" The boy started to take off his sweater and then his jeans. Kieran looked at Adrian, squinting his eyes. "I accept the challenge," he finally answered and began pulling off his clothes. "Guys, just kidding. That's enough." Olivia was worried. "The water is so cold, you'll catch a cold." "Come on, Olivia. The boys want to show who's braver and stronger. Let them fight for the victory." Mel stood next to her. excited for the exciting competition. "What's the prize for the winner?" Adrian asked. "A kiss, of course." Without even thinking about it, the girl replied. "Let's get this over with." Olivia was still trying to talk the boys out of this crazy idea. The river was small, but it was dangerous to stay in the cold water for long. "Kieran, you seem like a sensible man. Please drop the argument." The guy came so close to her that she could hear him breathing. Olivia's heart sank. "Don't be afraid of anything. I'll swim across," he said quietly and lightly touched the girl's cheek with his fingers. Olivia froze, feeling the color spill down her cheeks, but Kieran was already walking toward the water. He and Adrian jumped into the water and swam to the opposite shore. The girls froze in impatience, wondering when they would get there and not have to worry. At one point, Adrian pulled ahead, but Kieran quickly caught up with him and overtook him, and then his head disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Olivia gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "He drowned, Mel." "No, it'll come out. Trust me," she said, staring off into the distance, her hand over her eyes as she shielded her eyes from the glare of the sun. "Where are you, Kieran? Show yourself already." But Kieran was nowhere to be seen. The minutes dragged by slowly. It seemed like an eternity had passed when the boy's head appeared on the surface. He was 10 or 15 meters ahead of Adrian and reached the shore very quickly. Kieran stepped onto dry land and waved to the girls, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the few minutes it took for the boy to disappear under the water, they had become very nervous. "Fool," Olivia said quietly. "Cool." Shaking her head, Mel said. When Adrian also appeared on the opposite bank, the girls had already calmed down. They saw the friends shake hands and walk along the bank toward the automobile bridge. After about an hour, they returned to the picnic site. Olivia was packing her things, empty containers and dishes, into her backpack. Her whole demeanor showed that she was upset, hurt, and about to leave, but Kieran didn't seem to notice. "Where's my prize?" he asked cheerfully. "I'm waiting for a kiss." Olivia saw Mel jump up to him, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him right on the lips. "You're a real hero," said the girl enthusiastically. "Olivia, aren't you going to kiss the winner?" Kieran asked, but the girl only took her backpack in her hands and walked towards the forest. She decided to leave. Her head was a little dizzy from the wine she'd drunk, and she was beginning to ache from the experience. Olivia stepped out onto the path they'd taken to the shore and headed into the woods with a determined stride. She was angry at the guys who'd made her worry, at Milka, who could kiss a guy she didn't know so easily, at herself for being shy and timid. The girl didn't notice that she had stumbled and twisted her foot. A sharp pain made her crouch on the ground. Olivia felt her ankle, her hands touching it painfully. She tried to get up but immediately sat back down, groaning in pain and helplessness. She couldn't walk any further. Olivia realized she had gone too far to call for help. The boys wouldn't hear her voice in the thicket of centuries-old pines. Olivia cried. "Why do I always have bad luck?" she thought. The day had started out so well, and then the boys had gotten into this stupid contest and she was in such a bad mood. And now her leg. Olivia heard the crunch of twigs and turned around. Kieran was walking down the path. When he saw the girl, he ran up to her. "Olivia, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" "I twisted my leg. It hurt," she complained, wiping her tears and sniffling her nose. "Let me see," he said, lifted the pant leg on her ankle and touched it with his hand. Olivia froze as she felt his touch. It excited her. She jerked her foot away, startled by the sensation, and moaned again. "I see," said Kieran. "Can you stand up?" He lifted her to her feet, then picked her up and carried her down the path in his arms. Kieran's strong arms cradled Olivia so tightly that she didn't even resist, trusting him. Kieran carried Olivia all the way to the house, and then lifted her, carrying her in his arms, to the 4th floor. Grandmother opened the door. "Oh my God, what happened?" She splayed her hands, clearing the passage. "I twisted my leg," Grandma Olivia replied. Kieran walked into the room and sat her down on the couch. Sweat was beading on his forehead. Only now did Olivia realize how much strength it had taken for him to come all this way carrying her. "We should call an ambulance," Nicole said worriedly. "Don't," the boy stopped her. "Do you have a bandage?" It was in the medicine cabinet somewhere. Nicole opened the cupboard and pulled out the shoebox that held the medicine. A moment later, Kieran was applying a tight bandage to Olivia's ankle. "I'll fix the leg and you just keep it off for a few days and the pain will go away," he said, cutting the tip of the bandage. "Grandma, I forgot to introduce you." Olivia remembered that she hadn't even introduced her savior to her grandmother. "This is Kieran. We went on a picnic together." "I'm Nicole." Grandma smiled. "Why didn't you look after Olivia, Kieran?" The boy looked embarrassed but didn't lower his eyes, just looked at Olivia. "It's my own fault, Grandma," she said. "Now I'll stay at home all the holidays." A boiling kettle whistled longingly in the kitchen. "Young man, I'll ask you to move the table to the couch, and I'll bring everything to tea," Nicole said, nodding at the coffee table in the corner. "I'll make tea with strawberry jam for the hero and savior. Do you like strawberry jam?" "I love it," Kieran replied cheerfully. A few minutes later, they were having tea. Kieran could see how proud Nicole was of her granddaughter. She gladly pulled out an album and showed him Olivia's baby pictures, which embarrassed the girl. "Look, Kieran, how funny she is here with the huge bows," Grandma said, pointing her finger at the black and white picture. "I took her to the first grade, and here we went to the sea with her. And this is the graduation. Isn't she beautiful?" Kieran nodded, looking at the picture of a pretty girl with a braid over her shoulder. They chatted some more, and Kieran got ready to leave. "Can I come visit you sometime? To see how your leg is?" he asked Olivia. "Come, I'll be waiting," she said it so easily, so naturally, as if she and Kieran were old friends. Olivia wished he would come and see her. And when the grandmother slammed the door behind the boy and came back into the room, she found her granddaughter smiling. She was sitting with her legs stretched out and resting it on the stool Kieran had carefully placed before he left. In her hands was a teddy bear, once given to her by her parents. "Are you keeping a secret with your favorite teddy bear?" Nicole asked, smiling. "Don't you want to share it with me?" "With what?" "Like how and where did you meet this Kieran guy?" "In the park, Grandma. Why didn't you like him?" The girl was suddenly worried, afraid that her grandmother would find faults in Kieran. "Not at all," replied the pensioner. "Nice guy. Have a good time, baby." Nicole left the room, closing the door behind her. After a while, Olivia heard her humming something in the kitchen. Grandma always sang when she put the dough in. "So it's going to be pies tonight," Olivia thought, closed her eyes, and fell into a happy, deep sleep. The next day she waited for a call from Kieran, but he didn't call. Busy, probably, Olivia thought. She spent the rest of the day reading. In the evening, Mel dropped by. As usual, brightly painted in a miniskirt and a blouse with a décolletage that showed off her ample breasts, she made the quiet atmosphere of the apartment noisy and cheerful. "It's your own fault," she reprimanded Olivia for leaving the picnic, twirling in front of the mirror. "If you'd stayed with us, none of this would have happened. Thank Kieran for finding you so quickly." "Yeah, he's good," Olivia said thoughtfully. Mel looked at her carefully. "Hey girlfriend, you're not in love, are you?" she asked with a sly squint of her eyes. "I didn't want to be in love with you," Olivia said, and I felt her cheeks reddening. "Kieran's a really nice guy, the kind of guy you could fall in love with. He brought me home, sat me right here, bandaged my leg." "Well, Adrian's just as good," Mel said with her arms at her sides. "He walked me home, too, and came to visit." "He was visiting you?" Olivia wondered. "Why?" "We still have some wine left." Mel plopped down on the couch with her friend and suddenly covered her face with her hands. "Olivia, we had everything with him. Everything, He left me just before morning." Olivia gawked at her friend. Mel, of course, was a flighty girl who did crazy things all the time, but to sleep with a guy they'd just met a few hours ago. Olivia couldn't get her head around that. "Did he confess his love to you?" she asked Mel, hoping that at least it wasn't just a fling under the influence of good mood and alcohol, but the beginning of a long and serious relationship. "Are you two together now?" I don't know. Mel took her hands away from her face and stared thoughtfully at the TV. I don't know. Mel removed her palms from her face and stared thoughtfully at the TV. Then why did you let him in? What's the big deal? You can't die from lack of male affection. As you know, it's a fish out of water. What cancer? What fish? What are you talking about? Olivia shrieked. If he slept with you, he must be serious. Yeah, you think Mishka from gym class had intentions too? And Kolka from law school? If all the guys I slept with married me, I'd be a sultaness with my own harem of men. Mel and Olivia laughed. Indeed, the boys were paying attention to the bright and cheerful Mel, and she was in no hurry to drive them away from her. But Adrian had more than caught Olivia's friend's eye. She really wanted to continue her relationship with him and maybe even get married. However, Adrian simply kissed Mel on the cheek and said bye without saying anything about a new meeting, but she hoped that he would call and ask her out on a date. Olivia and Nicole were going to spend Victory Day watching movies. There were a lot of old and new war movies on the program. They sat comfortably on the couch, teacups and cakes on the table in front of them. Olivia didn't feel like going outside, even though she and her grandmother went to watch the parade in the town square every year. And this time, Nicole was feeling healthy. I'd better stay home and watch the parade on TV, she said to Olivia. Do you think your Kieran is marching in the parade now? Why is he mine? Olivia was outraged. He hadn't even called in a week. Okay, she'll worry, call again, or come over. Hello, here I am. Nicole smiled. Her girl seemed to really miss her new acquaintance. Olivia and her grandmother hadn't even had a cup of tea yet when the doorbell rang in their apartment. I'll get it, she said. Her leg wasn't aching anymore, and Olivia was able to get around the house just fine. She opened the door and was stunned. Kieran stood on the threshold. He was so handsome, and handsome in his military uniform, smiling so charmingly that Olivia couldn't hide her joy. Hey, he said. Happy holidays. Kieran handed Olivia the box of cake. She took it and stood there, smiling. Can I come in? Kieran asked, and Olivia snapped out of her stupor and led him into the hallway. Grandma, she shouted, we have guests. Come in, we're having tea, you're just in time. Nicole looked out of the room. Young man, you're on parade today. She gave him an approving glance. And then on parade, laughed the boy. We've been preparing for the festive march all week, and we haven't had time to visit you at all. We're not offended, the pensioner waved her hand, although someone here missed you very much. Bah, Olivia yanked her back. What a BA. Go to the kitchen. Get another cup and saucer for our wonderful guest. We'll celebrate Victory Day. Olivia's grandmother definitely liked Kieran. She suddenly sounded very tired and sent her granddaughter and her boyfriend out for a walk. I'll lie down for a while, rest in silence, and you go, there are people having fun. Artists probably perform. Kieran and Olivia walked around the city until late afternoon. They watched the performance of various amateur groups, went on rides in the park, and fed the ducks on the pond. The boy and girl did not even notice how it got dark outside, and citizens began to gather on the square to watch the fireworks. Olivia looked at the colorful scatterings with her head tilted back, and Kieran couldn't take his eyes off her delighted face. He mentally said, how beautiful you are, Olivia, and it turned out he'd said it out loud. Olivia looked from the night sky, lit up by the salutes, to Kieran. What did you say? She asked. I didn't quite hear it well. I love you, Kieran said, and kissed her on the lips. When she got home, Olivia was over the moon. Her grandmother was watching TV, but when her granddaughter appeared in the doorway, she turned it off by pressing a button on the remote control. Grandma Olivia rushed over to Nicole and hugged her. I'm so happy you can't even imagine. Why can't I? Yes, I can. You think I wasn't in love? Kieran told me he loved me. He's a good guy, he won't hurt you, said Grandma. Don't hurt him either. Appreciate what you have between you. It was a hot summer, with almost no rain at all. The residents of the city were suffering from the heat, escaping the scorching rays in the shade of trees, in parks near fountains, and on the river bank. The forecasters' predictions were disappointing. The heat would last for several more weeks. "Would you like some ice cream?" Kieran asked Olivia. "I can't eat it anymore." She looked at the boy with a pleading look. "Every day only ice cream saves me from this heat." "Do you want to go somewhere?" Kieran asked. "Like where?" Kieran had a vacation after graduating from the academy, and Olivia was on vacation. They were completely free and spent almost all their time together, dreaming about the future, making plans together. "If you want, we could go north," Kieran suggested, and Olivia couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. "To the polar bears," she laughed. "We can go to the south. We will swim in the sea and sunbathe on the beach under the southern sun," offered another option, beloved girl. Kieran, the words sun, tan, beach make my eye twitch. "Well, I'm sorry, but I just want somewhere to be with you, you know." So that there was no one else at all, he hugged and kissed the girl. "Come on, let's go to a campground. There is a great place outside the city. There are houses, forest, river." "It's a good idea," Olivia agreed, but she felt a sudden fear, a bad feeling, and clung tighter to Kieran. The next day, the two of them took an electric train out of town. The administrator of the camp met them at the gate. "I'll show you around," the young man said, inviting you to follow him. "I understand you booked a cabin away from everyone else, so I left you that apartment over there." He pointed toward the forest and led Olivia and Kieran to their cabin. It was small, surrounded by pine trees. There was one large room with a couch, a table, and a large bed. "Here is the tea station." The administrator showed a kettle and a box with tea bags. "You can use it. The canteen is open on schedule. You can buy drinks, pastries, some food from morning till evening in the cafeteria. After dinner, there is dancing on the grounds. Come along if you want to have fun. Oh yeah, linens are in the closet. Towels are there too. Make yourself comfortable, and if you need anything, call me." The young man left, remembering to close the door behind him. Olivia sighed, looking around. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "To walk, rest, and enjoy each other," Kieran answered. He wanted them to remember the weekend spent at the camping site, because he was going to say the most important words to his favorite girl. "I feel uneasy," Olivia said quietly. "Worried about Grandma? Thinking about how she's going to be alone without you?" "I don't know. Something just came up." "Well, I'll try to take your mind off your sad feelings," said Kieran. "The first item on our cultural program is a trip to the river." They spent the whole day walking through the woods, boating on the river, swimming in water as warm as milk. Olivia and Kieran even skipped lunch, eating the pies that the caring Nicole had put in her bag. When it got dark, the boy and the girl sat on a bench near their cabin, admiring the stars and kissing. Kieran hesitated to tell Olivia the important news, afraid that she would be upset. "Is something bothering you?" Olivia noticed her lover's condition. "Yeah, you know, we're going to have to break up." The girl pulled back and looked into Kieran's eyes, and he realized he'd picked the wrong words. No, you misunderstood. I'm going on a business trip." "For how long?" Olivia asked. "I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a year." The girl knew that there was a military conflict in one of the friendly countries, and that troops were being sent there to settle the unrest. But she had never thought that it would affect her and Kieran. "When?" Olivia asked, hoping that the moment of parting wouldn't come soon enough. "The day after tomorrow," the boy lowered his head. "If you only knew how hard it would be for me to leave you, I'd go crazy." Olivia put her palms to his face and looked into his eyes with a loving gaze full of concern, understanding, tenderness. "When I come back, you and I will get married. I promise you." "I love you very much," she said quietly, almost in a whisper, and then added, "Let's go." Olivia took Kieran's hand and led him into the house. She slowly undid the buttons of her dress and slid it to the floor, revealing a slender body in white lace lingerie. "Give me this night," Olivia said. "I'll be waiting for you, remembering every moment, every second." The lovers didn't sleep a wink until morning. They caressed each other again and again, plunging into the abyss of passion. 2 months had passed. Olivia stood in the bathroom mirror and looked at her face. Blue circles under her eyes, sunken cheeks, pale skin. She didn't look good. She moved her gaze to the sink, where a pregnancy test lay on the edge. 2 stripes were clearly visible against the white background. She was going to have a baby, a part of the person she loved. But Olivia was more worried than happy. Kieran hadn't sent a single letter, and she'd checked the mailbox several times each day. There were no phone calls, no messages either. Once, when she met Adrian, Kieran's friend, on the street, Olivia asked him if he had any news. But the guy shook his head, for some reason averting his gaze. The girl understood that in hot spots. There was no time to think about girls and love relationships, but it was possible to find a minute to scribble a couple of lines, "Everything is fine. I love you. I miss you." And now this pregnancy. Olivia thought about how to tell her grandmother so she wouldn't worry her too much. Nicole had been complaining more and more lately about her heart and high blood pressure. Olivia had called the ambulance again yesterday, and the doctors had insisted on hospitalization, but Grandma had flatly refused. "I will die at home, not in a government bed," she said, barely able to move her tongue, and signed her refusal with a weak hand. When she left for the institute, Olivia was always worried whether something had happened at home or how her grandmother was doing. The anxiety for her nearest and dearest people kept her from concentrating on the lectures. Mel was always trying to get Olivia to wake up. "Wake up, everyone's looking at you," she said as the entire audience stared at the girl, who had her eyes closed and was mumbling something under her breath. Olivia's friend sighed and shook her head. "You can't torture yourself like this." But there was no shadow of the old Olivia, the Olivia with whom they'd gone out in the evenings, shared secrets and made plans for the future. Olivia seemed petrified. "Olivia, what took you so long in the bathroom?" she heard Nicole's voice. "Breakfast is on the table. Hurry up or you'll be late for school." Olivia sat down at the table and reached for a sandwich. But when she felt a nasty lump in her throat, she put the piece of loaf with cheese and sausage back on the plate. After she drank her coffee, she kissed her grandmother and walked out the door. On the way to the institute, the girl met her friend. Mel stood near the entrance to the building and smoked a cigarette. When she saw Olivia, she waved at her. "There won't be a first class," Mel said. "The teacher's sick, so we can go shopping." She tossed the cigarette butt away and slung her bag over her shoulder. She noticed that Olivia was in no mood again. Mel understood that she missed Kieran, that she was in love, that she was in love, that she was waiting to hear from him, but she thought she shouldn't be so upset. "Nothing again?" she asked her friend. "No, there's other news though." "Well, what's the news?" Mel tugged on Olivia's arm. "I'm pregnant." The girl pulled a test out of her purse and showed it to her friend. "Shit, how could you do that?" Mel said, surprised and frustrated. "How?" Olivia didn't understand. "Careless, that's how." Mel handed the test back to Olivia and reached for the pack of cigarettes that was sticking out of the pocket of her bag. "Stop smoking," Mel, her friend, told her. "I just threw it out." "I'm allowed. I'm not pregnant. ... Thank God." "What are you going to do? You're not going to have a baby alone with no husband, no money and no education, are you?" "I'm going to," Olivia said quietly. "You can't kill a child for lack of money and unfinished education. It wasn't his fault." "Oh, come on." Mel waved her off. "What baby? There's a little pea in there yet. Don't be a fool. I have a phone number of a good friend. She will arrange everything, but you'll have to pay. Do you have money?" Olivia was silent, absorbed in herself. She heard her friend's words, but they sounded distant, barely audible. "I said I had money to pay for the abortion." Mel shook Olivia's arm, trying to shake her out of her stupor. "I'm not having an abortion," Olivia said. "It's my and Kieran's baby. It has to be born." "You're an idiot," Mel exclaimed. "Where's your Kieran?" "No? And what makes you think he wants that baby? Did he ask you to bear him children? Or maybe he promised to marry you?" "Kieran will come back and everything will be fine. And I will give birth and wait with the baby for him." In the evening, Nicole and Olivia watched TV together. The girl thought about how to present the news so that her grandmother wouldn't get too excited, but she didn't even have to say anything. Nicole, who had raised her granddaughter since she was a little girl, knew her too well. "Are you thinking about how to tell me about the delay?" she asked, keeping her eyes on the TV screen. Olivia was silent. Her grandmother's foresight, her gift of sensing the state of her beloved granddaughter, always amazed the girl. "You're worried," Olivia, wondering what to do. How to move on, right? "Okay, Grandma. And it is possible not to think, but just to live. You should not try to rewrite your destiny. It is written long before the birth of any person by someone from above. You are doing a thankless job by racking your brains, doubting, thinking over every next step." "What should I do, Grandma?" Olivia suddenly put her head down on Nicole's shoulder, and Nicole put her arms around her and stroked her head. "Just to live," the pensioner replied calmly. "To live and enjoy every new day." "What do you think Kieran would say if he found out we were having a baby together?" Olivia asked, looking into Nina Petrovna's eyes. "I would say the same thing: you have to live and raise a child, love those who deserve it, and make each of their days better, happier." "I'm scared." "Don't worry, you'll give birth. By the end of the course, you'll be with your baby all summer. And then I'll help you. I'll take care of the baby while you're at the institute. Then you'll get your diploma, and that's it." "What if Kieran doesn't accept the baby?" "Don't think about it. It's going to be okay." The new year was approaching. The streets of the city were covered with illuminations. A huge Christmas tree was put up in the center, shining with thousands of lights, and the counters of stores were bursting with New Year's goods clappers, sparklers, glittering balls, and soft toys. Olivia and Nicole pulled out a plastic Christmas tree and began to decorate it. "Your parents brought this tree back from vacation," my grandmother recalled. "Now it is no longer fashionable, but back then few people had such trees. Don't throw it away when I die. Let it be a memory." "Don't talk. She's going to die," Olivia said, half jokingly, half seriously. "Have you forgotten how you promised to help me with the baby?" "It's not like I'm going to die next year," Nicole laughed. The news was on the television. The announcer, in an elegant blue suit and tie, was saying something, but Olivia wasn't listening, only catching some of the phrases. Suddenly she shouted, "BA, turn up the sound," and she got off the stool she had climbed on to put a star on top of the tree. "More than 50 of our soldiers and officers are missing. Their fate is still unknown." In other news.
Grabbing the remote, Olivia began to press the buttons, switching channels, hoping to find a newscast somewhere else. But in vain. The end of a sentence the newscaster said made her uneasy. Apparently they were talking about the military sent to settle a localized conflict. Kieran could have been there. That explained why there were no letters or messages from the boy.
Olivia sat down on the couch, her heart racing. She reached for the table where the pitcher of water stood, but suddenly passed out. I'm awake. A man in a white coat leaned over Olga. "How do you feel?" "It's fine," Olivia said, trying to get up from the couch.
"You're lying down. You don't have to get up." The doctor returned her to the pillow with a gentle but insistent motion of his hand. "You're lying down." The doctor gently but insistently moved his hand back to her pillow.
"What's wrong with me?" "I understand that you were worried and fainted. There is no threat of abortion, but I would recommend that you lie down, rest, and don't be nervous. Don't watch TV. It's only bad for you." The doctor smiled. "Better listen to music." Which one? Olivia didn't understand.
"Anything that gives you pleasure. Turn around, we'll give you a shot. It's a sedative, don't worry."
The EMT and paramedic said goodbye to Olivia and Nicole, wished them health and a happy new year, and left. "You scared me." Girl grandma shook her head. She covered her with a blanket, turned on the wall lamp, and sat down in the armchair. "Grandmother, do you think he's missing too?" Olivia asked. "We don't know, Mel. Let's hope all is well. Your Kieran comes back." By the end of winter, Olivia was no longer hiding her position. Her belly was clearly protruding, growing larger with each passing week. She carried the pregnancy easily, successfully passing her classes and studying for exams. And when the baby kicked her for the first time with its little foot, she circled the significant day in her grandmother's wall calendar with a red felt tip pen. There was still no word from Kieran.
Mel, can you ask Adrian to ask around about Kieran amongst his contacts? They went to school together, so maybe someone knows something? Olivia asked her friend.
Adrian who? Mel didn't immediately realize who her friend was talking about. Oh, that Adrian. I haven't seen him for a long time.
What? Aren't you two together? Olivia wondered. I thought.
What's there to think about? We slept together a few times, and then I got bored with him. He doesn't take me to a restaurant, he doesn't take me out, he doesn't have much money, he doesn't give me presents. I like it better with Vincent from journalism school. You know what kind of car he has? It's so hot. Mel continued to talk about her new lover, and Olivia wondered if she should go to the academy herself. Maybe they knew something about her lover. The next day, she was already standing at the checkpoint. The officer on duty demanded a pass, which the girl, of course, did not have. Not without a pass, he kept saying the same thing when Olivia asked him to let her through. I need to know about one man, she begged. He was sent on a business trip, and I haven't heard from him in 6 months. I can't help you. If you get a pass, I'll let you in, but in the meantime, get out of here. You're not supposed to be here. Olivia turned and walked away, but the clerk suddenly called out to her. Girl, try to go to the military enlistment office. They should know about everyone who. Well, you know where. Thank you, Olivia thanked him, and she headed off to the enlistment office. As she got on the bus, she wondered why she hadn't thought of it before. Only the military could tell what happened to those who were sent on a business trip. And who will you be to him? The captain asked Olivia in the duty room through a window with an iron grill.
The girl is confused. She's basically nobody to him. A close acquaintance, you know. We only give information about military personnel to relatives. The captain looked at her with a cold stare. It seemed that even Olivine's pleading eyes couldn't break through that ice block.
The girl came out of the building. A woman was sobbing nearby, trying to comfort her, and a young man was standing nearby. Did something happen to you? Olivia asked. Should I call an ambulance? The guy looked at her, shook his head. No, I called a cab. It's coming, I'm taking my mom home. My brother died on a business trip in a hot spot. We just found out. Olivia's legs felt woozy. What if Kieran did too? She squeezed her eyes shut. No, not that. He was fine, she would feel it. She couldn't help but feel it.
Completely frustrated, Olivia returned home. Nicole was lying on the couch. A tonometer and several packets of pills on a stool next to her.
Grandma, what? Blood pressure. Olivia rushed to her grandmother. Yes, baby, Grandma said quietly. I've had some medicine. It'll make me feel better. I'll call the doctors.
Don't bother people, Nicole stopped her. It'll pass.
You tell me if it gets worse, okay? Said the girl. I'll tell you to go eat. There's soup on the stove and cutlets. Go on, Mel. Nicole closed her eyes. Olivia adjusted the blanket and went into the kitchen. She was really hungry. The girl heated up some soup, cut off a few slices of fresh bread. Having eaten quietly, she washed the dishes behind her. Trying not to make any noise, Olivia tiptoed into the room where her grandmother slept. With a glance at the old woman, she walked to her room and lay down. Tired from the long walk, Olivia fell into a deep sleep very quickly. When she opened her eyes, it was already dark outside the window. The girl got up, drew the curtains, and turned on the light in the room. Her grandmother must still be asleep because no sounds were heard. Olivia went into her room and called out. Bah, are you asleep? There was no answer.
Olivia moved closer to Nicole and took her hand. The palm was icy, lifeless.
Granny, wake up, Granny. The girl touched her cheeks, shoulders, shook her arm, but the old woman didn't show any signs of life. Olivia called an ambulance and the doctors diagnosed a heart attack. After the grandmother was taken to the morgue, the girl called a friend. Mel, please come, please. Grandma's dead, she said quietly. In half an hour, Mel was already sitting next to her, hugging Olivia. She didn't cry, she just wanted someone to be there for her. and she had no one else but Mel and Kieran.
A month had passed since his grandmother's death. Olivia was coming home from the institute. From week to week it was already time for her to give birth. The women's clinic even suggested that she go to the maternity hospital.
"You'll take vitamins, get drips, prepare your uterus for labor," the midwife told her. But Olivia refused. She needed to take as many credits as possible, close all her debts at the institute, and consult with her academic assistant about whether she should take a sabbatical or whether she could write and defend her diploma without a year's break. Thinking about all this, Olivia didn't notice when a beautiful blue foreign car pulled up next to her and a familiar male voice called her name. "Olivia, hi. Don't you recognize any old friends?" The girl slowed down and turned her head at the voice. Adrian jumped out of the car. He looked stunning: black suit, snow-white shirt, shined shoes. "Hi, Adrian. What a meeting." Olivia rejoiced. She hadn't seen Kieran's friend in a long time. The thought flashed through her mind that maybe he knew something about her lover. "What's up? How's life?" Adrian asked, hugging Olivia lightly around the shoulders. "I see you're doing well. When are you due?" "Soon enough." "Come on. I'll give you a ride," Adrian offered and pulled the girl by the arm. Olivia tried to refuse, saying it was good for her to walk, but Adrian was adamant. He opened the car door and gently placed Olivia in the front seat, then walked around to the driver's seat. "Shall we?" He was still as cheerful as the first time Olivia had seen Adrian. "How are you, Olivia?" Adrian asked, turning onto the avenue. "I know about your grandmother. My condolences." "Thank you. I'm fine. I'm going into labor any day now. The baby is kicking so much I can't take it anymore. And I can't wait to see him." Adrian smiled and nodded his head, looking at the road. "How are you doing?" Olivia asked him. "Working," the guy replied uncertainly. "Did I? I thought you were going to serve. I haven't seen you in a long time. I thought you'd been assigned somewhere." "That's what happened. They were going to send him to the Caucasus," Adrian replied. "My father got involved. He gave someone some money and put him to work for his old friend's company as head of security."
Do they pay well? Olivia didn't know why she'd asked that question, probably just to keep the conversation going.
"I'm fine. I have enough to live on," Adrian replied. "Here we are." The car stopped in the driveway. The guy looked at the girl, smiled. "Will you invite me for tea? Let's have a little chat." "Come on." "I don't really have anything for tea," Olivia said. "You don't have to." Adrian opened the door, helped Olivia out of the car, and with a click of the remote, locked the car doors. They reached the 4th floor and Olivia pulled her keys out of her purse. "How do you get up to the floor with a belly like that? It must be hard, isn't it?" Adrian asked. "And if you're carrying bags when you come from the store?" "I don't store much," Olivia said, smiling. "Why?" "I don't need much, and I don't have much money." "You can't get by on a scholarship, even if it's an extra one." She opened the door and invited Adrian in. The guy was visiting Olivia for the first time. He noticed that the girl didn't live very well. And where would the wealth come from? At least her grandmother used to get a pension every month, but now it's become difficult. Adrian walked around the apartment. The furniture was old, but well maintained. The wallpaper had not been reglued for a long time, and the television set. Such things were rarely found in the apartments of city dwellers. "I'll put the kettle on now," Olivia said. Pouring tea into cups, she asked Adrian, "Have you heard anything about Kieran?" The boy looked at Olivia carefully. Beautiful, even despite her huge belly, she looked at him, trying to hide her anxiety. She wasn't very good at it. "I didn't want to bring it up with you first, but I knew you would." Olivia sat on a stool, stirring her tea slowly with a spoon, her head bowed slightly. Her bangs fell over her eyes, and she fixed them with a light hand. Adrian had a hard time fighting the urge to run his hand through those straw-colored curls. He liked Olivia a lot.
"Do you know anything about him?" Olivia looked up at the boy.
Not specifically about him, Adrian replied. But they say that the whole company was killed.
Olivia covered her mouth with the palm of her hand to keep from shrieking.
This can't be. I believe in the best, too. After all, Kira and I were friends. I went to the military enlistment office. They said they don't give information to strangers. And there was a woman crying. Her son had been killed on that business trip. They don't disclose information so as not to worry people, Adrian said sadly, but rumors spread faster than television news. Can your father find out anything about Kieran through his own channels? Olivia dared to ask Adrian. She knew that his father was not the last man in town, had extensive, very useful connections.
I'll ask, Olivia. I promise. Adrian finished his tea and got ready to leave. I gotta go. Business. Can I write down your phone number and you can keep mine? In case you need it.
Of course, Olivia said with hope in her voice. Maybe Adrian would know something and call her. They exchanged phone numbers and the guy left. Olivia sat down on the couch thinking. They were friends, but they were very different.
The next day, Olivia's phone rang. She was about to go to bed, having just gotten out of the shower.
I'm listening, she replied. Hi, it's Adrian. She heard the phone ring. Olivia's heart raced, wondering if he'd found out something about Kieran.
Yes, Adrian, go ahead. Are you still awake? Can I come in? I'm right here, at your doorstep.
Sure, come on up, Olivia said, and she hurried to throw on a robe over her nightgown. Adrian walked into the hallway carrying 2 huge bags and pulled them in front of the girl. Here, the humanitarian aid has reached you. Smiling happily, he said.
The boy took off his shoes and strode into the kitchen. Olivia watched in amazement as he put meat, sausage, cottage cheese, milk, candy, canned goods, several kinds of cheese, juices, tea, coffee. The groceries didn't fit on the table anymore, but he kept putting them out of the bags.
What is it, Adrian? The girl asked in surprise. I told you, humanitarian aid. After finishing the groceries, he sat down on a stool. I didn't ask. Why?
Olivia, I just wanted to help you and make you happy, Adrian said. His words sounded sincere, kind, and the smile stayed on his face. Olivia wanted to scold him at first to make him take it all back, but when she saw how pleased he was to do something for her, she melted. Well, let me at least give you some tea, she said, turning on the gas stove and filling the kettle with water.
Can we have coffee? Adrian asked. I have to be on duty with my men until morning today. The chief has come up with some kind of reinforcement, so we'll be waiting for the enemies until morning.
What enemies? Olivia didn't understand. She was even a little worried. I'm just kidding, the boy said. They just asked me to be on duty until morning.
They drank tea and talked, but Olivia waited for Adrian to find out something about Kieran and tell her. Finally, when she couldn't bear it, she asked him directly. The boy grew sad for a moment. He seemed to be struggling to find his words.
You don't have to wait for Kieran anymore, Olivia, he said finally. No one has any other information. It's all confirmed.
What was confirmed? Olivia didn't want to believe the worst thing that could happen to her lover. Kieran is gone. In one ravine, our military found more than 20 decapitated bodies, officially recognized as the bodies of dead men from Kieran's company. I'm sorry.
Olivia covered her face with her hands, crying bitterly. Adrian stood up, walked over to her, and put his arm around her shoulders. Suddenly she cried out, and clutched her stomach. Oh, Mummy. It hurts, Olivia moaned. Oh, I think I'm in labor. I'll call an ambulance. Adrian frantically searched for his phone. No, I'd rather drive myself. It would be quicker that way. He helped the girl get dressed and went down to the car, calming her down, saying some ridiculous words that everything would be fine soon, at the same time cursing at the careless drivers who were obstructing the traffic. Adrian pressed the gas pedal. Soon the car entered the courtyard of the maternity hospital and slowed down at the steps. The boy jumped out, opened the door to help Olivia, and gently led her into the waiting room.
"Anybody there?" he shouted. "There's a girl in labor here." On a sunny April morning, Olivia sat in a hospital bed holding her baby boy. The baby had been born strong and healthy. Black hairs tousled on his head, just like Daddy, Olivia thought as she stroked her son, holding him to her chest. Her heart was full of love for this little man, the most dear to her in the world. The door to the room opened and a nurse came in. She was holding a huge bouquet of roses in a bag. "Provushina, Olivia, there's a message for you," said an old woman. "Look at the flowers they're carrying for moms now, 100 of them in a bouquet." In the past, fathers would come to the window, pick daisies and dandelions from the flower beds, and their grandmothers would rejoice, as if they had brought flowers. They loved them. Nanechka laughed, put the bouquet on the nightstand, and put the bag on her neighbor's nightstand.
"Who's it from?" Olivia asked.
A representative, in a suit, said that the note was in the bouquet, but he went under the windows, it seems, said the nurse.
Olivia put the baby in the cuvette and herself took a small card out of the bouquet of roses. "Congratulations on your son." Look out the window, she read the message, written in beautiful, even handwriting. Adjusting the robe across her chest, Olivia walked over to the windowsill. A smiling Adrian was standing below. When he saw the girl, he waved his arms. The guy shouted something, but Olivia could hardly hear anything. The windows in the ward were closed. Then Adrian ran to the car and opened the trunk. From there, he pulled out a luxurious, very expensive baby stroller, blue in color. But
Olivia watched in amazement as he showed her the different positions: a stroller for stroller sleep, a car cradle, a carrier, and this is how you can carry a baby when they're already sitting up. Suddenly, Adrian slipped his hand into his pocket and showed Olivia his cell phone. He dialed her number, and the room resounded with the sound of an incoming call. "Why did you spend so much money?" Olivia asked with a laugh. "It's a very expensive stroller. I wouldn't spare anything for your baby. He'll ride like a real king."
"Thank you so much," Olivia thanked him. "For what?"
"For everything." Adrian looked at her and was silent. Skinny, pale after childbirth, in her hospital gown, she was so touching, so real, so tender, so desirable. "I'm right here. Call me if you need me," he said calmly, emotionless. And then he was gone. Adrian waved to Olivia, got in his car, and drove out of the hospital yard. The girl looked thoughtfully at the car as it drove away. "I wonder why things didn't work out with Mel. Adrian is so caring and open." She remembered her friend and decided to call her and tell her the news. Anticipating how happy Mel would be to hear that Olivia had given birth, how she would start asking questions, she dialed her friend's number. No one answered for a long time, and then she heard some unintelligible sounds. Olivia thought something was wrong with the connection and decided to call later.
On the day of discharge from the maternity hospital, Olivia and the baby were met by Adrian. Over the next few days, the young mum hadn't been able to reach Mel. At first, she was a little worried about why her friend didn't contact her, but then she decided that Mel had found a boyfriend again and was head over heels in a relationship. So she couldn't be bothered with Olivia. It wasn't just Olivia who was having a party. As soon as they heard the music, women in labor and other wards of the hospital leaned against the windows. In the courtyard of the hospital, the musicians were ready to play a touching song on command. Fountains of balloons and fresh flowers were set up around the hospital.
"What a celebration yours made for your discharge." The midwife shook her head approvingly. "A caring father, there aren't many like him nowadays. Most of them come drunk or, at best, hungover." Olivia didn't bother to reassure the doctor that it wasn't the baby's father. Why would she? It was a complete stranger, and she didn't need to know the details of the patient's personal life. For a moment, she thought about Kieran. Why fate was so cruel and he died without even recognizing that he had a son. It was a pity for Olivia, and that the grandmother wouldn't get to see her great-grandson.
"Look, are all the body parts in place?" jokingly asked the midwife, undressing the boy. "Here are the hands, here are the hands, here are the feet. There are 5 fingers everywhere." Look at him, he is smiling. He understands that he will go home with Mummy and Daddy.
The woman began to dress the newborn, and when she finished tying a beautiful bow on the envelope, she said, "Hold your happiness tight. Grow up healthy and come back for your second."
Olivia thanked the midwife, and they walked out onto the porch of the birthing center together.
At that moment, music came on and a handsome male baritone began to play. The love song moved Olivia so much that she even wept. Adrian walked over and embraced the baby. The staff was in tears at the touching scene, which was watched by the entire maternity ward. When the music finished, dozens of colorful balloons soared into the sky. "What did you name him?" Adrian asked, examining the boy by lifting the edge of the envelope. "Taylor," Olivia answered. "Taylor Swan." Adrian looked at her. At that moment, there was so much happiness and tenderness on Olivia's face that he couldn't resist hugging her. The driver with his camera jumped up in time to take a wonderful picture.
Olivia hadn't been able to reach Mel because she'd been out. She was in the hospital, the same hospital where Olivia had given birth, but one floor up, in the pathology department. "What's going on outside?" she asked her roommate when she heard the music. Mel couldn't get up and walk to the window. She had just been given an IV.
"Some of the young mothers are met by a happy and loving daddy," replied a neighbor in the ward, who was sitting on the windowsill and watching what was happening in the yard. "What, with an orchestra?" Mel wondered.
Hey, musicians, balloons, flowers. A happy woman who has such a husband. He'll probably carry her in his arms and give her child the best. She sighed, stroking her bulging belly.
Where do men like that come from, Mel thought, thinking that Adrian would never do such a thing. All he wanted to do was dive into bed with her, enjoy himself like a young stallion, and not care what happened afterward. Mel didn't dare to tell Adrian that she was pregnant for a long time. She had relationships with different guys, but she always took care that there were no surprises and took birth control pills. But apparently she somehow managed to skip taking the pills, and one day a pregnancy test gave her a positive result. Damn it. She threw the test in the trash can in frustration. We have to solve this problem right away. She dialed the number of her friend who could help and arrange an abortion, but she didn't answer. Mel decided she would call later. Toward evening, Adrian called to say that he would be coming to see her tonight. He entered the hallway at 8 o'clock sharp. Mel's small apartment was instantly fragrant with the scent of expensive, refined perfume.
"Did you miss me, my little hen?" Adrian grabbed the girl by the waist and pulled her tightly against him. "Missed you, of course," she said, smiling. "You don't come so often lately. You've forgotten all about me." "You'll forget you." The boy dragged her to bed, tearing off Mel's silk robe and underwear as he went.
Throwing her on the bed, he unzipped his pants. "Take off your clothes properly," Mel said, panting with excitement and passion, but Adrian was on top of her, growling like a wild animal and roughly overpowering her again and again. When he shuddered and groaned and collapsed, pressing her into the soft, springy mattress, she whispered.
Why so rude? A tear rolled down Mel's cheek. She was hurt that Adrian had acted like a street whore, like he'd raped her.
He rolled over onto his back, adjusted his pillow, and said quietly, "I'm sorry, something came up. Give me a cigarette." Mel reached for the pack.
"Are you in trouble?" she asked. The girl had already gotten to know Adrian's character very well. Sometimes he was rude to her, but more often he came to relax in her arms and complain about his unloved job, his failed military career, his overbearing father who decided everything for him.
"No," Adrian replied. "It's fine." "I have something to tell you." Mel decided to tell Adrian that she was pregnant. There was a faint hope in her soul that the guy would want a child and marry her, or at least that they would raise the baby together. She agreed to it even without a wedding, without a stamp in her passport. Adrian took a drag on his cigarette and released a cloud of blue smoke from his mouth.
"I just found out today, ... I'm pregnant." "Well done, you've created a problem for yourself. Now you'll solve it," the guy said indifferently.
"You got me pregnant." Mel rolled over onto her stomach and looked into his eyes.
Adrian was quiet for a moment, finished and put the cigarette out on the ashtray, then stood up and pulled on his pants.
"Mel, I'm not a child and neither are you," he said, and the girl felt the metallic tones in his voice. "You and I both know what we have in common. I never promised you anything, and I certainly never dreamed of having children with you." "Adrian, but it happened. I didn't do it on purpose." She got it the guy was buttoning his shirt. "And how do you know it's me who got it, and not the other men you've been screwing around with?"
Adrian, how can you do this?
"Why? You think it's a secret to me that it's not just me you're spreading your legs in this bed? You're a whore, Mel. You're just a painted, brainless whore. You think anyone would want to have children with you? I can't even imagine you as a mother. What can you give your children?"
I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I just wanted to tell you the news, because we have to decide what to do together. Mel got up from the bed and put her arm around Adrian's shoulders. "I'm not forcing myself or this baby on you. I'll have an abortion and that's it. Just don't leave me." Adrian pushed her away, pulled several large bills out of his wallet and tossed them on the nightstand.
"There should be enough here," he said, and walked out of the bedroom. A second later, Mel heard the door slam shut in the hallway. What an asshole, she thought, picked up her phone and dialed the number of the grocery delivery phone.
"Hello, I'll have a pizza and a bottle of whiskey. Write down the address."
Adrian brought Olivia and the baby home. A security guard followed them up to the 4th floor of the girl's apartment, carrying heavy bags. Olivia was completely immersed in her thoughts. Even though she was happy, she had a lot of problems to solve: paperwork for her allowance, a call to the pediatric clinic, and a graduation coming up. "Is she asleep?" Adrian asked as Olivia entered the kitchen. He was taking groceries out of the bags and putting them in the refrigerator. "I've got a lot of stuff here, so I figured I'd have enough for a while, and then I'd bring you whatever you want. I also bought some baby stuff. I didn't know what I'd need." Olivia glanced at the bags of diapers, onesies, bottles. "Thank you. You're a big help." "It's because I love you, ... and your baby," Adrian said softly. The girl looked up at him. It seemed to her that Adrian was different now, different from before. Serious or something. "Olivia, trust me, it's going to be hard for you to raise a baby on your own. And I'll do anything for you. I've liked you since the first time I met you at the bus stop when we went on that picnic. But I couldn't tell you then. You realize. Adrian, you're kind, caring, sweet. I don't know what I'd do without you. But you know I don't love you."
"It doesn't matter, as long as I love you. You'll never, ever regret believing me. I'm begging you, let's get married. I'll be a good father to Taylor." His father, as Kieran Olivia looked out the window and watched the children playing in the yard. Taylor would grow up to build sand towers in the sandbox.
It's sad and painful, but Kieran will never see his son. I can keep his memory alive, always telling Taylor what a hero his father is. And maybe you and I can still give Taylor a little brother or sister.
Feeling him come up behind her and touch her shoulder, Olivia turned, looking intently into Adrian's eyes.
"What about Mel?" the girl asked. "What will she say when she finds out?" Mel and I had never had anything serious, just meetings for fun. Neither she nor I ever loved each other. And anyway, Mel wasn't made to be a wife and mother, and you're different. A baby cried from the room. Olivia hurried to the baby, and Adrian sat down at the table and thought. It seemed to him that Olivia was about to agree to his proposal. They got married. They decided not to have a wedding or a big party, which upset Adrian's parents very much, but he was firm in his decision. "We have a young son, no time for weddings," Adrian said as he cut off to his parents. For a year, they'd been adjusting to each other. Adrian went out of his way to do everything for Olivia and Taylor. He bought expensive gifts and jewelry for his wife and toys for Taylor. Olivia saw her husband's efforts and was grateful, but every day she noticed more and more how much Taylor looked like Kieran. He had the same eyes, hair, even a smile. The girl never forgot her lover. Adrian saw it all, felt it all, and hoped that time would heal the wound and cover with the dust of oblivion the memories of his wife about Taylor's father. Olivia was walking with her son in the park one day. Taylor sat in his stroller, gazing around. He had a cookie in his hand. Olivia rolled the stroller down the alley. The girl came to this park often. There was no traffic noise, birds were singing, and she could always talk to other moms, just like her, walking with strollers. Suddenly, a tall, slender girl caught her attention. She staggered down the alley, sometimes falling, struggling to get up and walking again. Olivia quickened her pace a little. "Young lady, are you ill?" she shouted, approaching the stranger. And she collapsed back onto the paving stones, leaned on her arm and tried to get up. "Come on, I'll help you." Olivia held out her hand to the girl, and when she looked up, she recognized the stranger as her old friend. "Mel, what's the matter with you?" Olivia exclaimed in surprise. She helped her friend up, sat her down on a bench, and rolled the stroller with Taylor closer. Her friend was drunk. Her hair was strewn over her shoulders. Her clothes were dirty, and an arrow was crawling down her leg in black capron stockings. Mel recognized Olivia, looking at her with a hazy stare that reeked of alcohol. "You look good." "Thank you, Mel," Olivia said. "Why are you here like that? What happened to you?" "And a lot of things happened to me." Mel burst into a coarse, drunken laughter. "And you, and your Kieran, and my Adrian. A lot has happened to all of us." "What do you mean?" Olivia didn't understand. "Mel, are you sick? Do you need help?" "Help?" The girl opened her purse and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She turned to Olivia and squinted her eyes. "You're the one who needs help, living in a fog and not noticing anything around you." "What are you talking about? Wake up, Mel, we were friends." "And I'm not friends with traitors. You betrayed everyone, me, Kieran. You know how bad I felt when you started living with Adrian. And you know how bad Kieran felt when you wouldn't even let him look at his son." "What the hell are you talking about?" Olivia didn't understand what her former friend was trying to accuse her of. "Do you have any money?" Mel asked her suddenly. "There's a card," replied Olivia. "Let's go." Mel struggled to get up from the bench and walk down the alley. Olivia followed her, rolling the stroller with her son in front of her, not wanting to let her go until she explained everything and told her about herself. They reached the nearest supermarket. "Give me the money," Mel said. Olivia handed her a bank card. Her friend entered the store and came out a short time later holding a bottle of alcohol. Soon they were sitting in the kitchen of Mel's apartment. Olivia was amazed at how messy the rooms were. There were things scattered everywhere, bottles, dirty dishes in the sink, and an ashtray full of cigarette butts on the windowsill. Mel took a glass and poured herself from the bottle. "I'm not offering you one. I know you won't," she muttered and raised her glass. "Cheers." "How did you come to this, Mel?" "Rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. And you helped me ruin my life with Adrian. He told me you didn't have anything." Olivia tried to justify herself. "Well, of course, there's nothing but 2 kids." "What kids?" Olivia thought Mel had gotten drunk and was talking nonsense. But her friend got up from her chair and shuffled to her room, her torn tights shuffling across the floor. When she returned, she placed a photograph in front of Olivia. It showed 2 babies. They looked no more than 3 or 4 months old. "This is Ciara and Vincent. And their father Adrian," pointing her finger at the picture. Mel said, "My children, the twins." Olivia looked at the faces of the babies in surprise. They were lying on the beautiful blanket next to each other, looking exactly alike. "You had a baby with Adrian? When?" Olivia exclaimed in bewilderment. "Only 6 months ago. And that asshole didn't recognize the kids. And I had my parental rights revoked. With his connections, he made a quick deal and put the kids in an orphanage." Everything she'd heard from Mel seemed unbelievably crazy to Olivia. Adrian couldn't do that. Yes, he had connections, he could do a lot of things, but putting his children in an orphanage. "And then he wanted to kill me. He got me drunk and tried to strangle me, but Kieran wouldn't let him. He hit him so hard." Mel laughed, her laughter sounding unnatural, theatrical. "Kieran who? What are you talking about?" "I don't understand anything," Olivia said, and stopped drinking. She took the glass from her friend, catching an angry look. Your Kieran punched him. Adrian was choking me and he punched him in the face. Mel, wake up. Kieran died on a military trip. No, he didn't. And he saw you. Where? I beg you, pull yourself together and tell me everything in detail. It turned out that Kieran was back, and the first thing he did was to stop by his friend's house. As he approached the driveway, he saw Olivia and Adrian come out of the door. The guy had a small child in his arms. They smiled at each other, talked about something, and then got into the car and drove away. A few days later, Kieran decided to find out about Olivia and Adrian from Mel. He went to her house, knocked on the door, but no one opened it. In his heart, the guy banged on the door. It was unlocked. Entering, he heard the sounds of a struggle, ran into the bedroom where Adrian was choking Mel. Kieran punched him and pulled him away from the gasping girl. Ah, he's back. Adrian, recognizing his old friend at once, said, "Hero, now you're going to get your rights, but your Olivia is no longer yours. She's my wife and we have a son growing up." Adrian pulled his passport out of his pocket and took out the picture that had been taken when he was discharged from the hospital. Olivia was smiling from the photo, and the boy was holding a newborn baby in his arms. As she listened to her friend's story, Olivia could hardly believe what was happening. It turned out that Kieran was not dead, as Adrian had told her. He was alive and knew nothing about his little son. "Give me a glass," Mel asked quietly, calming down. "I need a drink." Olivia moved the glass, watched silently as her friend poured the liquor into it, and then asked,
"Why didn't you tell me?"
"Don't you understand? I hated you with all my soul. Where's Kieran now?" "He's probably gone. Who knows where he is?" Mel waved her hand uncertainly.
"Why didn't he come to me, but went to Adrian first? He didn't mention it."
"Nope," the girl shook her head, pouring herself another. "I understand him, though. He's so handsome, proud, strong, and he'll come to you one-armed." "What do you mean, one-armed?" Olivia didn't understand anything at all. Everything Mel was telling her could have been the plot of a stupid show, like so many shows on TV nowadays. But it couldn't have happened in real life. "And his arm was torn off on a business trip," Mel said, collapsed her head on the table and snored. The girl fell into a dead, drunken sleep. Returning home, Olivia wondered how to go on with her life. On the one hand, she has a strong family, a caring husband, a favorite son. On the other hand, Kieran, as it turned out, is alive, and he thinks that Olivia left him, preferring to live with Adrian. She was hurt that he hadn't made himself known, hadn't come to see her, but had appeared in front of Mel and a former friend. All day, thinking about how to live on, she decided that she would not change anything in her life. But Mila should be helped. 3 years had passed. Olivia and Adrian lived in a spacious apartment and raised Taylor together. The baby was growing up to be a very bright, active boy, constantly demanding attention. Olivia spent the whole day dealing with her son, and in the evening waited for her husband from work. Sometimes, looking out the window as he drove up to the entrance and parked the car in the yard, she thought that more caring than Adrian husband could not find. He spent all his free time with his wife and son, and last year they flew to Italy together. The doctors said it was good for the boy to breathe the healing air. For his 3rd birthday, Adrian gave Taylor a huge battery-powered car. The boy wasn't very good with the car, but he squealed with delight when his dad helped him steer it and race it down the long hallway. The whole family gathered to celebrate Taylor's birthday. Adrian's parents treated Olivia and her son calmly, not complaining, but every chance they got they had the pleasure of reminding her that she was an orphan and a dependent. Olivia didn't like it, and Adrian just waved it off, saying, "Never mind." Her husband's older sister often reproached Olivia for running around with her son like a piece of paper, and Adriana still hadn't given birth. As she set the table for the party, Olivia thought she would have to endure the reproaches, taunts, and sarcastic phrases directed at her again. Lately, she'd noticed more and more that Adrian himself was bringing up topics that insulted and offended his wife. Why he did so, she did not understand. When they were alone, more caring and affectionate Adrian could not imagine anyone. But in the presence of people who were strangers to Olivia, he always found something to pick on. And this time he was out of line. Olivia's taunts amused her in-laws. Everyone at the table seemed to be having fun except her. "Adrian, stop it. I feel bad." Olivia tried to stop her husband. But he went on. Then the girl could not stand it. Trying to appear calm, she smiled and said softly but very clearly, "The other day I went to the orphanage where your children live, honey. I looked at them, brought gifts and toys. You know, they're so cute. Why don't we take them for the weekend? The principal said it's possible." Adrian put his fork on the table silently, then slapped Olivia, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her out of the room. The family stared at them, uncomprehending. "You've scraped it all together, daughter-in-law, on your own head," said the mother-in-law sneeringly. The guests continued to eat as if nothing had happened, placing appetizers and salads on their plates. "Mom, what kids did Olivia say Olivia was talking about?" Sister Adrian suddenly asked. "Who knows who she is? She's got some nonsense in her head, so she's just saying whatever she wants. Andriusha only has Taylor." In the kitchen, Olivia wheezed, trying to free herself from her husband's strong, clinging fingers, which squeezed her neck. Adrian pinned her against the refrigerator and hissed, trying to keep his voice low so the family wouldn't hear. "Who do you think you are? You think you can tell my parents and sister whatever you want? Let go or I'll scream. I know all about you and Mel, about how you put your own children in an orphanage and stripped her of her maternal rights, about how you've been lying to me all these years. Shut up. Have you forgotten the swamp and poverty I pulled you out of? What would you be blaming your bastard for if it wasn't for me? My son is not a degenerate. He has a father and he's alive. That's something to remember. You should be grateful to me for the rest of your life. You've been living like a cheese and butter. Let go or I'll tell your parents." Adrian looked into her eyes with anger. He loosened his grip and finally let go of Olivia. She sat on the stool, rubbing her neck where her husband's fingers had left marks. "How could you? You acted like a monster." "It's none of your business. Mel's a whore. I never loved her. And the fact that I gave birth to her is something you have to prove." Already, Olivia said quietly. "What?" Adrian didn't understand what his wife meant. "It's already been proven. Mel and I ordered a paternity test. Vincent and Ciara are your children. They're your blood twins. What kind of monster are you to throw your own babies out of your life? How could you deprive them of their mother? People like Mel can't be normal mothers. She's a slut and an alcoholic." "What are you talking about? Didn't you do everything you could to make her drink? Didn't you want to kill her? Kieran's a witness. He'll testify that you strangled my friend to get rid of her." "You can't prove anything." Suddenly, Adrian's eyes were aflame. No one would believe a degenerate alcoholic who'd been deprived of her parental rights.
"You're wrong. Mel has been in treatment and hasn't been drinking alcohol for a long time," Olivia said triumphantly. "She and I are almost finished with all the necessary paperwork. Soon she'll have her children back and she'll be happy. And I'm leaving you right now. I've had enough."
"Stop." Adrian grabbed her hand and gripped the girl's wrist tightly with his fingers. "Do you still want your relatives to know?" Olivia looked boldly into his eyes, determined to tell her parents-in-law what their favorite son was really like. The guy let go of her hand, lowered his head. "Go away and never come into my life again," was all he said. On a May morning, Olivia and Mel were picking up the children from the orphanage. Vincent and Ciara were all dressed up. Mel had bought them nice suits and shoes, and she was getting excited. The day before, she and Olivia had cleaned up the apartment, setting up the nursery in Mel's former bedroom. Now there was a bunk bed, a closet full of children's things, and a large basket of toys. Mila had a very difficult time. When she learned what had happened in her life, Olivia began to visit her friend whenever she could get away from home. When she went for a walk with her son, she bought food to feed Milka, but she kept demanding alcohol. But long conversations, convincing her that only by stopping drinking, she could get her children back, did the trick. Mel agreed to treatment. For 2 months, she was in a private specialized institution, where Olivia paid for her treatment. When Mel was discharged, she didn't look like the cheerful, mischievous, flighty girl her friend had known her to be. Something was broken inside her. She kept thinking about the children, berating herself for the mistake she'd made in her life by letting Adrian send them to an orphanage. Olivia, on the other hand, convinced her every time that everything could still be brought back. She did everything she could to get Mel the twins. And so today they would settle into this room with new baby wallpaper and a big fluffy rug on the floor. Looking around the room, pleased that everything was working out so well, Mel said, "Thank you, Olivia, and I'm sorry if I hurt you in any way." "Don't thank me, we're friends." "It'll be okay," Olivia hugged her friend, who had recently been ready to fall into the abyss, to lose the most important thing in a mother's life, her children. "Mommy, will they let me play with toys?" Olivia asked Taylor. The girls laughed. "Of course they will," they replied almost in unison.
"Well, shall we go?" Mel said. "We have to pick up some more cake and brownies."
Mel was happy that in just a few hours her apartment would be filled with children's laughter and happiness.
Walking home from Mel's, Olivia held Taylor's hand. They walked down the park alley that led to Olivia's house. The girl wondered how life might have turned out if she hadn't met Kieran in that park one day. Yes, she had been through a lot, but looking at the boy walking beside her, holding her hand tightly, Olivia was happy.
"What do you think of Ciara and Vincent?" she asked Taylor. "Good ones. Why were they living in an orphanage? They have a mom, Aunt Mel." "It happens," Kid Olivia answered uncertainly. Taylor was a bright boy and understood a lot of things, but she thought it was hard to explain to a child why children were abandoned by their parents. When he grew up, he'd understand. After Olivia packed her bags and left Adrian on her son's birthday, his relatives repeatedly called her and threatened to take Taylor away. Her husband never dared to admit to his parents that Taylor wasn't his son. Well, then Olivia had to tell them herself. Tired of listening to the threats, she did just that. "Taylor is not Adrian's son or your grandson," she told her mother-in-law. "So leave us alone and don't call again." Adrian's mother yelled something else into the phone, that she would sue, take a DNA test, take the baby away from Olivia, but she just hung up. Olivia wanted nothing more to do with those people. Tomorrow she would take Vanya to Mila's. Her friend promised to stay with him for a couple of hours while Olivia was at the interview. The girl was going to get a job at the gymnasium. If everything went as Olivia planned, Taylor, as a child of an education worker, would be given a place in kindergarten. Life was getting better. As she thought about it, Olivia walked leisurely down the alley, holding her son's hand. Taylor snatched his hand out of hers and ran down the path. "Taylor, where are you going?" Olivia shouted after her. But the boy ran and ran. He saw a beautiful butterfly and rushed after it. Suddenly, the child stumbled and fell with all his might on the paving stone path. Olivia rushed to her son's aid. She saw a strange man come to the child, lift him up and put him on his feet. "Son, you're all right," she ran over to the boy and squatted down to examine the wound on his knee, which was visible through his torn pants. "How could it be? How many times have I told you not to run?" She suddenly realized that a man had helped the boy up and thanked him without even looking in his direction. "Thank you so much for helping my son." "You're welcome, because that's my son too. How you doing, fighter?" Olivia slowly raised her eyes to the stranger who had come to her child's rescue. Her heart was pounding frantically. She stood up, not taking her eyes off his face. Kieran looked at her with the same kind, loving velvet eyes. "Hello, Olivia," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Kieran ... Love. Olivia couldn't believe her eyes. Taylor's father was standing in front of her, the man she loved most in her life. "I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you'd never come back." "How could I not come back? I promised you, remember? I promised you there, at the campground, surrounded by centuries-old pines, in our cabin, where we loved each other so much." "I remember everything, and I never forgot," Olivia said quietly. "Let's go home." The three of them walked down the park alley toward the exit. Kieran held his son with one hand. But Olivia didn't care that her boy's father had come back crippled. The important thing was that now they would always be together.